Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
The midday heat melted the asphalt, causing a transparent morava to rise over the paths in the park. Adriana watched this natural phenomenon frustratedly, not noticing the white buildup that left her ice cream dripping down the hem of her dress. Adriana, you're all caught up. What are you staring at so intently? It's like you've been zombified. Get back on the ground. Betty first snapped her fingers in front of her friend's face, and then slapped her shoulder quite sensitively. Adriana flinched and wrinkled her nose unhappily. What's the matter with you and your fists? Is there any other way to bring you back to reality? I wasn't going anywhere. I was just staring a little bit. See, the air is shaking over the path like it's a transparent mirage. I wish I'd brought my camera. I would have taken a great picture. Don't worry. Tomorrow it'll be just as hot, and you'll be able to shoot here forever. By the way, it doesn't have the same effect as the road. It's a bigger scale. Betty had little interest in optical illusions. She was more concerned with real things. For example, she was worried about her friend's dress. The girl pulled a handkerchief out of her white purse. Fancy at least a little for 3 dresses. If I hadn't known you for 100 years, I'd think you were missing screws in your head. Personally, I don't give a rat's ass what goes on around me. Well, I mean, all this natural phenomena and global warming and crap. Adriana strenuously wiped away the ice cream stains, but the traces of her confusion were already firmly disappearing through the thin fabric. What are you worried about? Betty grinned, noticing the failure to remove the stain. I think you're trying for nothing. Now you'll be walking around all day. And as for what I care about at this point, I can answer without hesitation. As the famous commercial says, thirst is nothing. When there's dough, that's not what it says. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but the point remains. You will not argue with me that for centuries everything was decided by money. And those who had a lot of it lived in chocolate. And those who couldn't save up, they lived a miserable existence for the rest of their lives. Centuries have passed, but nothing has changed. That's why for me now it's of paramount importance to provide my beloved with such a life as in the first case. Adriana playfully swiped her friend's nose with her own handkerchief. And you're telling me I'm fantasizing? Personally, I can't even imagine an honest way to accomplish your project. Your parents are just regular working people. I'm sorry, but you're not exactly a hard worker either. Betty even took offense at such a low opinion of her abilities. You're just like all the other teachers. Old stereotypes. How can they trust you with kids? You're the one who needs to learn about life, not from you. I can learn from me. And they're against it. You're right about some things, though, but you're a little too starry-eyed. I got into UCLA on the first try. Adriana has dealt a devastating blow to her friend's ego. And after graduation, you're going to work in a village club. I'll say, lucky ticket. Betty raised her slender finger in triumph. Your girlfriend has outdated information, and I won't go to the force. I'll conquer my Olympus here in the capital. Betty on her face began to resemble the same body part of a fairy tale colobach. Wanting to stretch the pleasure, the girl kept silent, nodding her finger on the bench to the melody from the dog waltz. But Adriana did not appreciate the level of her friend's acting skills. Betty, save your tricks for the grateful audience. I'm out of here, and I don't know why you called me here. Betty, ignore Adriana's displeasure. Soon stuffed fun faces, and continued to nod the same uncomplicated tune, but in an accelerated rhythm. Okay, no offense. Consider it a draw today, and there are no secrets about me. And I've decided to take a liberal arts degree. And now I'm a free bird. Oh my gosh. What about the mandatory work experience? Instead of answering the question directly, Betty suggested maybe one more scoop of ice cream to cool it down a bit. And I think I'll pass. You should. You'll get a sore throat. Now for the main point. Times have changed, and now you can do almost anything. If you have the desire and a little money. Anyway, my mother has some old connections, and she's arranged everything in the village. I'm not going. I'm going to raise the culture here. Betty was surprised again. I don't quite understand you. I'll tell you everything on my fingers. Briefly, it goes like this. Me and a couple of other people I know decided to form a team. Field of activity, weddings, and anniversaries. That is fully organization of events with voice, vision, and photos. We have almost a complete set. What's missing is a photographer. That's when I remembered your hobby. Now you're getting it. Adriana had not expected such a proposal. Her gaze expressed amazement. Her mouth opened involuntarily. Betty was pleased with the effect. Why don't you say something? Wait, Betty, I can't say that right away. You've just thrown me off my game. What about work? I have my own class now. What am I going to tell my parents? Why don't you just sit here and think about it? I'm buying you ice cream. High heels. Betty disappeared behind the shrubs that mossy cap on the sides of the park paths. It wasn't more than 2 minutes before she reappeared. Here you go. It's hot. So where was I? Wedding anniversary. Betty, but I'm not really into that stuff. And frankly, I don't like the idea. I tried acting once before and I just let you down. It was a long time ago and it's not true. Adriana didn't accidentally recall that long ago story, which still makes her blush. Betty was a sophomore at the time and asked a friend to work as a snow maiden for New Year's Eve. Adriana, we're swamped. There are plenty of Santa Clauses, but not enough snow maidens. It's nothing complicated. They come to the address, say their words, give presents, and that's it. But you can earn money for your pocket money. Betty knew how to persuade. And Adriana was enrolled the same day as a temporary employee of the company, the name of which she immediately forgot. She and Santa Claus gave the first 2 addresses to the same wives of students. Worked like clockwork, but the parents of children for some reason considered it their duty to treat the fairy tale guest. That's why after 2 visits, Adriana's companion's coordination of movements was impaired. And attention span. To put it simply, Grandpa knocked on the wrong apartment, which was in the application. Since the case was December 30, all decent people already at this time begin to slowly celebrate the main holiday of the year. The landlord, too, was already under a degree. Seeing Santa Claus on the doorstep of his own apartment, the man rejoiced sincerely. Come in, Grandpa. We've already been waiting for you. Snow Maiden regarded these words as a signal to action and immediately got down to business. While she read poems about New Year's fun of the host with Santa Claus missed another drink. Finally, it came to the handing out of presents. And Adriana, as it was written in the script, said loudly, "Where are our kids, girls, boys? Good Santa Claus, I brought you presents. Come and fly." Sort out all the presents, but no one answered Snow Maiden's call. Adriana repeated the piece one more time, but the landlord kept saying, "I'm for both today. I demand a gift." The man reached for the bag, which was stuffed to the brim with dolls, cars, and sweets. Santa Claus didn't even resist. He giggled and looked for an artificial beard. Then Adriana made one last desperate attempt. "Citizen, where are your children, Rick and Anna?" The man rolled his eyes upward in a weird way. "My kids are still up there in heaven. They haven't come down yet. And I don't. I have another last name, but I'm not telling you. I don't know how it would have ended if the drunken owner's wife hadn't shown up." It turned out that Rick and Anna lived downstairs. The unlucky couple was laughed at by their colleagues for a long time. Adriana was very worried about failure and warned her friend, "Betty, don't ask me for anything like that again. I've never felt such shame before. Adriana, don't make a big deal out of it. It's not a big deal. It's just a minor incident. But for 5 minutes of, as you say, embarrassment, you've made a nice profit." Indeed, the fee for the role of the Snow Maiden amounted to a lot of money, and Adriana used the money to buy a camera that was pretty cool for the time. Of course, Betty did not leave attempts to attract her friend to participate in such events, but always received a polite refusal. But the offer to work as a photographer seemed tempting to Adriana, and she agreed. Everyone loves holidays, but few people know how to turn an event into an unforgettable experience. Betty was a real ace at it. Creative solutions from her fountain flowed, and there was no shortage of customers. The popularity of the company Mood Plus grew by leaps and bounds, and after a few months had to screen clients, although the company was legally registered on Sebastian, who was in charge of the technical part. Betty was in charge of clients and finances. She came up with the idea to change the work. Guys, why should we work for pennies when we can increase our income by 10 times and work only on weekends? To do that, we need to change our approach to clients a little bit. That is, to give preference to those who will pay more. These are the conditions of the modern market. Sebastian did not immediately agree to this option. I don't want to waste my time either. And Betty's offer would help us get to the next level. But there's one big but. We have an unspoken agreement with our competitors not to poach clients. Betty's looking down her nose. How could there be? But when it comes to Sebastian's collective benefit, it's not gentlemen who enter the ring, but wrestlers. And so it is in business. And again, I agree with you, Betty, but I have to object again, because in the ring there is a fair fight, but in business more often prohibited techniques are used. And I've, understandably, made myself clear. Quite, but there's a method to every scrap. I'm sorry, but to enter the field of talentless with their flat humor and terrible singing real professional is not proper. Nowadays, everyone who can't be bothered wants to make an easy buck. And by the way, not all customers like such cheapness. And the question of our safety can be discussed. I think we can afford to hire a couple of security guards. Sebastian and Betty tried to keep the other employees of the company out of the fun business. And there were only 3 permanent employees. Everyone else, including Adriana, were temporary employees. She was usually warned when she needed a photographer's services, and then she showed up at events with a full set of equipment bought at the company's expense. David, the girl's father, was truly jealous of her. You're lucky. Adriana, I too, when I was young, got interested in photography, and even before the wedding housewarming party myself went. But I had a Zenith at my disposal. At that time, it was a luxury. Of my childhood memories, the fondest were when my father let little Adriana watch him develop pictures. Thanks to him, she learned to choose the right exposure and capture interesting moments of people and animals. The girl received her first recognition at the age of 13 for a series of photos about the nature of her native land. At that time, her works were even shown on TV, and for winning the contest, she was given a new project with cassettes. For a whole week at school and in the yard only talked about the girl's talent and her resounding. The first successes. But Adriana was not one to turn up her nose. She believed that each new victory obliged her to hone her skills. After consulting with her father, the girl enrolled in a photography studio. It was there that she was taught how to work properly with the camera. There she recognized all the subtleties of the art of photography. But Adriana liked shooting the sky with clouds or autumn trees more than wedding adventures. When she told her father about it, David thought for a long time before giving his assessment. You see, my daughter, the world has changed a lot. The values of romanticism are no longer in vogue because it doesn't pay enough, and any living person has many needs. Alas, you have to eat every day and wear something. So you have to choose between what's right and what's profitable. But you didn't choose your dad's. Why did I choose the first one? And you see how we live by the standard. Nothing extra. That's why my daughter took my advice. Try to find that golden mean, because on one altruism today will not last long. The meaning of this truth Adriana realized fully only a year after that momentous meeting with Betty. Within a few months of working at Mood. Plus, she was so involved in the new business that she could not imagine how her life would have turned out if she had not accepted her friend's offer. And that's what made the girl make the choice. Although she liked working at the school, and she really loved children, but she wanted something more. At weddings, she caught with a camera. The most touching moments of the first day of married life of complete strangers, and in her spare time and filmed what brought creative satisfaction. When she told her father she decided to leave school, David wisely said, "You're an adult, and it's your decision to make. The only thing I can advise you is to think carefully. Sometimes a person commits a rash act and then regrets it for the rest of his life. I don't want you to regret anything. But in any case, Adriana, you can always count on my support." But there was one other person who was always there for her. That's Sebastian. The head of the company was 10 years older than the girl, so she always listened to his advice. True, from the gaze of the ubiquitous Betty, and eluded. that the head of the firm did not just sympathize with Adriana. A friend. Don't you notice the way Sebastian looks at you? I feel sorry for him. Although Adriana could see that the chief was paying a lot of attention to her. She wasn't considering him for a date. Betty, you're exaggerating as usual. We have a purely working relationship. Sebastian is a very decent man. Adriana, are you a fool or are you pretending to be? Decent people also want to love and be loved. But if I don't like Sebastian, what can I do with myself? Then at least have some decency. Respect him. Otherwise, when he shows up, your face looks like you've swallowed a lemon. Adriana didn't like her friend's tone or the subject. Betty, why are you hiding for Sebastian's fate? You should be the one to take charge of him. He's imposing a bow on me, but he's not my type of man. Her friend looked at Adriana with a look that made her hot. Like you're 17 years old. In a couple more years, you and I will be out of circulation. Men are more attracted to young girls. And those over 25, they pay attention to them on a sporadic basis. That's a fact. Number one. And about Sebastian, I'd love to take care of him if I was in his circle of interest. It was the first spat between childhood friends. For a while, they tried to keep their distance. And the resulting rift grew larger every day. One day, Sebastian invited the girls to his office. The girls received an unusual order from the wedding elite in style. What do you think? We are up to the task. Betty, without hesitation, said, It's not even worth the trouble. Sebastian, you remember we've done something like this before. This is an unusual case. The client wants to fully, that is, to reflect the era a la 70s. This means that everything must correspond to that time. The entourage of the kitchen, the music, and he even wants the photo in black and white. We can do it all. I don't want to miss out on a job like this because it's a very substantial amount of money. Betty answered readily. There will be no difficulty on my part. Sebastian turned to Adriana. What does our photographer Sebastian Illich say? The task is difficult, but doable. I understand that the client wants total immersion, not stylization, as is common today. Well, yes, he even emphasized it several times. Then I'll need period equipment, film, and more. The first item is fine because my father has a live Zenith camera. It's a professional camera in working order. But there is a problem with the film. I think we will address this issue. I have collectors among my friends who are obsessed with the Soviet era. Fifth unusual wedding. Adriana prepared as if the upcoming events would decide her fate. But most importantly, for the first time, both lifelines crossed because there was an opportunity to fully satisfy a creative demand and earn good money at the same time. Although Adriana came in, she shoots quite a few weddings. This event struck her to the core. The immersion in the right time period was so deep and real that it became a little uncomfortable. The guests were delighted but also expressed concern. We won't be stuck here forever, or I have to pick up my car from the repair shop tomorrow. Alone. An older man, already a little tipsy, shared his fantasies. Personally, I like it all, and I would love to stay in that era for a week, especially since tomorrow is the 10th, and at our factory we use to get paid on those days. Imagine, I come to my native enterprise and go straight to the cash register. There'll be an uproar when it turns out that I'm a messenger from the future. The event, according to the idea of the organizers, was held on the territory of the estate of the groom's father. Therefore, all the guests felt relaxed and led naturally. Adriana worked enthusiastically, looking for favorable angles for each frame. At some point, she was so firmly immersed in the process that she involuntarily voiced her main fear. Man, I wish I hadn't accidentally exposed the film. This kind of footage. The girl did not expect that her cry of the soul would be heard. She shuddered when a soft baritone asked her where you, our dear photographer, got this rarity. The girl turned around and saw a young man with a hippie hairstyle in front of her. The guy was wearing a jacket in a large plaid, provocative green color, and pants, didachku. He was looking at the machine in the girl's hands with interest. The appearance of the young man Adriana somehow seemed ridiculous, and she laughed out loud. You accidentally did not run away from the set. The guy parried the young lady. I could ask you the same question. Adriana cast a fleeting glance at her second leg dress and almost choked with a new fit of laughter. The young man grabbed a glass of lemon from a nearby table and held it out to the injured woman. "I really don't want to lose you in the first minutes of our acquaintance." Adriana took the couple sips. "Have we met? I don't recall a moment like that. Unless we crossed paths in a previous life." The young man supported the joke. "That's right. I didn't realize it at first. Why was I drawn to you so strongly? At first I thought that the Earth's gravity began to work in a different direction. Then I realized it was my past that was to blame. It's just a pity that everything has been erased from my memory, so I'll have to start all over again. Wouldn't you agree?" The game of the past fascinated Adriana, and she readily answered, "Yes, I'm Adriana." The guy in the plaid jacket gently shook the girl's outstretched hand. "Kevin, I would like to kiss your hand, but such a liberty may be misunderstood by you and the people here. I hope to have the opportunity to do so again in the future. After all, fate has not accidentally tied our paths in such a knot at this wedding. By the way, the happy newlywed is my best friend." The velvet voice of Kevin acted on the girl like hypnosis. She agreed with everything her new acquaintance said. Adriana was so engrossed in the conversation with her new acquaintance that she forgot about work. Betty was watching the couple closely from the side. "I think so. My girlfriend got caught in the net. We have to save the day." Kevin tried to cheer up the girl as much as he could. He sprinkled witticisms and decent anecdotes. Adriana responded to each pearl with whistling laughter. She was so engrossed in the conversation that she completely forgot about the terms of the contract with the customer. Betty decided to be indecent. She stood at full height in the middle of the path where the young men were strolling leisurely. Politely, but firmly enough, she asked her companion, "Do you mind if I deprive you of the company of this lovely young lady for a few minutes?" Kevin, in the same playful manner, replied, "Of course, but only for a couple minutes." Betty took Adriana aside. "Adriana, get on with your work, otherwise you are letting the whole team down. What's wrong with you? You just take one look at this handsome man and don't even dream about it. He's not your type. You know him. All I know is that his parents are rich. However, this wedding is only for high-flying birds. Go on, get to work." Betty was fixing Adriana's hair for some reason, and she felt her friend's hands trembling. It was the first wave of thawing after the unpleasant conversation. But Betty wasn't the only one who was disturbed by Adriana's new acquaintance. Sebastian also watched with pain and anxiety as the girl, whom he secretly loved with all his soul, was being groomed by an impudent major. The romance of Kevin and Adriana developed so rapidly that the changes in the behavior of his daughter noticed and David. "Adriana, what could have happened to make you walk like a moth? Of course you can, and I'm not privy to heartfelt secrets, but I'm worried about you." The girl kissed her father in the field. "Now I know what happiness is. I can even taste it, and I'm not going to hide anything from you because you're my best friend. I think I've met the one person every girl dreams of. That's pretty much it." David was expecting something like that, but for some reason, it didn't make him happy. "I'm not going to lecture you, but I'm worried about your mood of universal joy. Isn't it premature? You can't just trust your first impression of a person." "Oh, Dad, you're telling me all kinds of horrible things you're going to tell Mom." For your information, psychologists, on the contrary, believe that first impressions are the right ones. Kevin is a well-educated young man with proper manners. He makes me feel so at ease with him. That's why, as you noticed, I fly like a moth. And love not only opened the girl, it became a source of inspiration for her. Light-hearted summer smoothly turned into a thoughtful fall. And Adriana wanted to convey this unusual mood in her works. She spent whole days in the neighborhoods of the city, looking for interesting places for shooting. And Kevin accompanied her. Once a young man jokingly remarked, "I am your faithful to the cameras carries." However, by modern standards, this is a very honorable role. Someday, many years later, I will accidentally find myself at the exhibition of an unknown artist and see familiar landscapes. Why unknown, Kevin? Where will I be many years from now? The confusion lasted no more than a few seconds. Kevin had a knack for quickly extricating himself from the most awkward situations. "My baby will always be with me, It's a done deal. High up in the sky, and the exhibition is years away. Can't you imagine? It's a whole detective story. Your work will be appropriated by another man, and you will be kidnapped, but I'll recognize your pictures and help the investigation. It's called Getting Away with It. I don't like your story, but I'll forgive you for once. Kevin knelt down. My queen. I will try harder from now on and be sure to shine with my talent. Adriana laughed heartily at Kevin's every joke. It seemed to her that their whole future life would consist of such sweet moments. So she didn't pay much attention to the conclusions of Betty, who had taken the initiative to gather information about her lover. A friend called her cell phone. Adriana, can you come to my place? Yes, as soon as Kevin is free. Betty interrupted her with undisguised irritation. I need to talk to you one-on-one. Okay, I'll be right there. Half an hour later, Adriana was sitting in the cozy kitchen of her best friend's apartment. It was noticeable that Betty was hesitant to start a conversation. She stirred her tea with a small spoon for a long time, and her pensive gaze was fixed on the window. Adriana could not stand it. You insisted on this meeting, and you yourself are silent. Yes, I'm sorry. It's just hard for me to talk to you about it. Why? I'm afraid you'll misunderstand me. But I'm really worried about you. I mean, you're like my own sister, Adriana. Likewise. So just tell it like it is and don't worry. I'll do my best to understand. I will. It's better for you to find out sooner, although nothing's really happened yet. But my personal agency found out what kind of vegetable your Kevin is. No, don't worry. He's not a bad guy. But in his family, his mom runs things. That's modern-day Cuban. She's a businesswoman who keeps her men in line. And she herself is not a breed, but they cleverly screwed over Kevin's father when he was young and in love. There was some drama in their family, and as a result, Kevin's grandfather passed the business to his daughter-in-law instead of his son. Now you can feel the lady's full name. There's 1 billion, if not 1 trillion in her hands. And what is the connection to me and Kevin here? The most direct. Kathy will decide who her only son should marry. This is so medieval. That can't happen in this day and age. Yes, it can. It's my job to warn you. If he really loves you, he'll do anything to stay with you. For example, you could sign secretly and then let the despot mother know. Can't we just go somewhere together? I mean, your Kevin has a good education, and they say he doesn't just sit around in an office. Adriana did not tell Kevin about the conversation with her friend, and then forgot about it. The couple spent the weekend at a camping site, where besides them, there was an elderly married couple. For 2 days, Kevin did not answer the calls, from which the cell phone burst. My mom lost me. By the way, I am already 28 years old, and I have every right to a private life. This phrase was not addressed to Adriana. She immediately realized that Kevin, even at a distance, was talking to his mother. The girl pretended not to notice these words. All day long, she was ecstatically shooting nature from her favorite. Against the backdrop of the sad fall evening, Adriana asked Kevin as if casually, I've got so much here about 100 shots. Please help me select the 10 shots that you think are the best. What do you say? If it's no secret, why do you want to participate in another contest? I haven't had any luck lately. I don't even know what it is. If you want, I can get you a solo show. I don't want to, Kevin. I'm always in favor of honest decisions, especially in art. I'm of the opinion that money can't buy talent. And my dad always taught me that. I don't quite agree with you. Talent should be helped, and talentless people will make it on their own. Alas, but that's life. I've done what you asked. I think these 10 pictures are the best you've ever done. Kevin held out a stack of photos, and Adriana was silent again, even though she knew he was right. Her abilities required a broader format than a wedding. But all the work the girl had sent to contests, she had been sent back with terse reviews. What lacked skill or originality? Today, Kathy was in a foul mood. And it was all because of her son, Kevin. The news, which was presented to her on a silver platter by her friend Christina, shocked Kathy, and the information about her son's adventures did not contain anything unusual. But it was the way Christina presented it that pissed her off. It happened over tea. Kathy liked to organize a tea ceremony at her place and asked for such an occasion her housekeeper, Aunt Clara, to prepare a drink on a special recipe. As soon as Christina appeared on the horizon, the women rushed into the kitchen. In 20 years of working in the house, the business is smaller. Aunt Clara had learned to guess what the hostess wanted by looking at her. But she also had another trait, a good ear. Even thick walls were no barrier for the housekeeper. She was also able to read lips because she had experience in a boarding school for deaf-mute children. So went into the house with proudly raised head past the trunk Christina, which Aunt Clara frankly did not digest. She immediately tuned her hearing to perceive the new information. Since the door of the living room, where the hostess always sang Ochi, was open, Aunt Slaga heard in every detail the conversation of her friends. The guest expressed her displeasure from the threshold. "Cindy, I heard a rumor that your Kevin is having an affair with some girl. Anatoly's officiating weddings. Whether they're taking pictures or not, I didn't get the details. And I don't need to. Not a muscle on Kathy's face. I don't know what people are saying. If you believe all the rumors, you could go crazy. So you're not denying it, and I'm not confirming it. Kevin is a grown man, and he needs to blow off steam sometimes. Pardon the lingo. Aunt Clara, where's the tea?" The housekeeper realized that it was her turn to come out and deftly picked up the trays with the checkers and the kettle with jam. The living room was immediately filled with a pleasant aroma. The mood of the guests changed. "Your woman makes a terrific tea. You'll let me borrow her for a couple of days." Aunt Clara wanted to hit the guest in the forehead, so she wouldn't make a vulnerable lady, but the hostess beat her to it. "Christina, you've forgotten that serfdom was abolished in Russia. If my memory serves me correctly in 1860 according to the new calculus. That's why Aunt Clara works for us on a salary. What's your habit of clinging to words? I was speaking figuratively. I even complimented your cook, and you threw my face on the table. You're the one with the hotel speech, Christina. Why are you in such a bad mood?" The guest asked for Aunt Clara, and she silently left, but she left the door open. Christina whispered loudly, "What kind of mood do you think I'm in if your Kevin has a fling with some chick? And my Lisa avoids my Lisa's company. The girl calls him every day. He's an asshole. He hangs up on her. What's that supposed to mean?" "Well, the girl thing is a bit of a stretch. Your Lisa is overheating. So don't give me any righteous indignation. And about this girl you're talking about, I'll check it out. Soak up the information." Aunt Clara was waiting for Kevin. The boy had grown up practically in front of her eyes, and the woman had maternal feelings for him. Kevin returned the favor, but he was especially grateful to the housekeeper for the fact that she always warned him about the family gatherings and stampedes that Kathy liked to organize. But this time the mistress was ahead of her. She first spotted Kevin's car pulling up and went out to meet him, which had never happened before. Although Aunt Clara was very worried about Kevin, curiosity got the best of her. It's gonna be episode 2 of Santa Barbara, and it's a shame the kid's gonna ruin his son's life. But contrary to expectations, the employee's house. Kathy affectionately asked her son about his business. Kevin gave a brief report on the current situation in the company. He was about to leave, but his mother stopped him. "I hear you're seeing a girl." Kevin was confused. "Is it forbidden? Why do you have to get all needly on me?" "I just feel bad that I'm the last to know about such an important change in my son's life." "Tell me who she is, what she does. Or are you just hanging out with her to pass the time?" Kathy tried to speak casually to get her son to talk frankly, and Kevin immediately took the bait. He sat down next to his mother and began to tell her about Adriana. By the look on his face and the words he used in his speech, the woman realized that the son was head over heels in love with this unknown Adriana. "I hope you will meet your father, your chosen one." Kevin clearly did not expect such a turn. "Of course, you will certainly like her. Adriana is very talented and kind." Kathy tightened her duty smile. Okay, I believe you, son. So invite your girlfriend to come visit us." Kevin flew in 2 leaps to the 2nd floor where his room was located. His father was just about to come downstairs for dinner and was surprised at his son's quickness. "Kevin, did you take on animals? Like a goat?" "No, Dad, and I'm just a little happy." Sam muttered good-naturedly. "Well, it's not dangerous. I wanted to call an ambulance to get you a shot for the raging net." Adriana immediately sensed something wrong. When Kevin had invited her over, she remembered how unflattering Betty had been to his mother. "Kevin, why don't we postpone this visit?" "Silly. Why put off what's inevitable? I've been to your house before, and in case you've forgotten, I asked your parents for their blessing for our marriage. But my parents are one thing. How your parents would feel about me, I don't know. Don't put bad thoughts in their pretty little heads. My folks are normal people." Adriana agreed. But a bad feeling did not leave her. But all these fears the girl wrote off to her delicate position. Quite recently, she realized that she was pregnant. But about this circumstance, she did not tell anyone. "When they will be sure, then I'll tell you." On the eve of meeting Kevin's parents, the girl felt quite bad. She already wanted to cancel the event, but the promise given to the groom did not allow her to retreat. Be that as it may, Kevin will think that I chickened out. To the surprise of the girl at the dinner party, in addition to her, other guests arrived. So Adriana was immediately lost under the stares and not very friendly looks. Strangers asked her about her family, work, and other things, and she felt uncomfortable in front of this society, but she especially tried. Christina is a friend of Kevin's mother. When Adriana's fork slipped out of her hand during dinner, the honorable lady said very loudly, "Unfortunately, not all people today know how to handle cutlery." My Cindy in London was trained in etiquette. Adriana barely waited until the meal was over and immediately politely declined. Kevin tried to stop her. "Adriana, where are you going?" "Thank you for dinner, but I have to go." Kevin rushed to see the girl off. They were silent the whole way, only at the entrance of their house. Adriana asked, "Why didn't you say anything? Don't you realize that your mother was giving me a spanking?" Kevin tried to justify Kathy's actions. "You little boy, you got it all wrong, don't you?" "Yes, my mom has a bad temper, but she doesn't want to hurt anyone. On the contrary, she was very happy when she found out that I have a girl with whom I am ready to tie my fate. Believe me, everything will be fine with you." Adriana really wanted to believe that, but the events of the following days shattered her expectation. When Kevin returned home, the guests were gone. Only Kathy was waiting for her son in the living room. His father showed up later. Kevin realized that now there was going to be an unpleasant conversation, and he was not wrong, as usual. The mother was the first to speak. "I didn't expect my son to have such disgusting taste. Or are you completely blind?" "Kevin, I don't understand you, Mom. Are you really going to marry that girl?" Sam decided to stand up for her son. "She's a nice girl, polite. After all, it's not your mother's place to live with her, and you're never asked. If you like her, you can keep your opinion. But I won't let my son marry a mere wench with no lineage." Kevin felt a wave of indignation rising inside him for as long as he could remember. His mother kept pushing him and his father, and he got tired of obeying her. So he decided to speak his mind. "Mom, I'm not a boy anymore. No one gave you the right to humiliate the girl I love, and even under your pressure, I won't back down. Her parents, unlike you, didn't put me under a microscope. They accepted me as family and blessed us." Kathy abruptly got up from the couch, and the tea utensils with a clinking sound rolled on the glass surface of the coffee table. "And they wouldn't be happy to get such a son-in-law for the poor. This is unprecedented luck, a fairy tale." Sam tried to get a word in edgewise again. "Cindy, why would you do that? You don't even know the girl's parents, and by humiliating them." "Sam will shut up too. This place is sick enough without you, and you're making your remarks. I've said my word. If you go to the registry office with this Adriana, I'll take everything away from you, Kevin, so you'll realize that I don't throw words around. Give me the car keys and the gold card." Kevin was about to reach into his pocket for the keys, but imagined how he would get to the office tomorrow on public transportation with the card. He didn't feel like parting with it either, and his righteous anger, caused by Adriana's mother's unfair attitude, quietly hid somewhere in the corner of his soul. His father watched his son in silence, expecting him to act like a man. But Kevin stood in front of his mother in indecision. His head slumped. Sam stood up and spat under his son's feet. Wimp. Adriana waited for Kevin to call, but the phone was silent. 2 days passed, But the groom did not give Lissa any signs. This state of affairs did not suit the girl. And on the third day, she called him herself. Kevin answered right away. His voice was full of joy. "Baby, I'm glad you called. I got a full zoo at work. I wanted to call you yesterday, but you don't have a minute to spare. How's your time? Maybe we should get together." Kevin, yeah, we should get together to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. It was pouring rain outside, so the lovers secluded themselves in a small but cozy restaurant. Kevin acted as if nothing had happened. "Are you having dinner? What do you want to order?" At the mention of food, Adriana felt nauseous and waved her hands. "No, I'm not hungry. Not just a glass of mineral water. I'll have something to eat. I've been on my feet all day." Adriana had gotten to know Kevin well enough to know what kind of conversation he was trying to hide his excitement. "Kevin, let's not waste time. I want to hear from you what's going to happen to us now." The young man chuckled unpleasantly. "It's going to be okay. Baby, believe me, you will definitely get married. But we have to wait a little longer." The girl could not believe that these treacherous words are said by a man who only a few days ago was for her the standard of a real man. "Kevin, what are you saying when later?" "Baby, you understand. It's not that simple. I'm in a very difficult situation, and you have to wait for everything to dissolve. You see, that's the way it is in life. You don't have to work hard. Kevin, I get it. I wish you happiness. And your mom, too." Adriana could barely hold back her tears. The resentment was burning her heart, and she hurried home to give vent to her tears and despair. But no sooner had she crossed the threshold of the apartment than the doorbell rang, and Kathy stood in front of her with a haughty look. "I can enter your chambers. Please come in." "No, I won't come in. There's no need. I only dropped in for a few minutes, Adriana, to ask you a favor." "I'm listening." "Look, Adriana, you realize that Kevin needs a different kind of girl than you can give my son. Love, loyalty, caring." Kathy said with irritation. "Those are just words. They're not backed up by anything. You can't base a marriage on that. Love and romance fades very quickly, and then it's business as usual. My Kevin has never needed anything. He has a very refined nature. You just can't stand to be around him. Leave him alone. Do you want me to give you some money? Even so. And if I don't want to keep him, what then?" Kevin's mother's voice sounded different. It was clearly threatening. "Then you're tainted, no doubt about it. You'll get a taste of real revenge from the family. I will never let you cross the threshold of my house. Unless as a servant you can do so. But you will never be my son's lawful wife. I hope you heard me." Kathy left, with a loud slam of the door. Everything she'd been through in the past few days came rushing back to her. She locked herself in her room so as not to disturb her parents and cried until morning. Betty didn't expect Adriana to show up at such an early hour. "Are you all out of sorts? Is something wrong?" "Betty, honey, you're my friend. The worst thing has happened to me, and I'm just now realizing how right you were, and I didn't listen to you. You need to calm down, and then you need to calm down. Tell me everything in order." Betty was saddened by her friend's story. She did not reproach her for her thoughtlessness and gullibility, but simply asked, "What are you going to do now? How do you think to get out of the situation? I'll leave, I can't be in this town, and know that Kevin is around. But you can't survive on your own with a baby. At least your parents are here. I'm not ashamed to look them in the eye. All right, girlfriend, don't despair. People don't get into this kind of trouble and survive. You have to use your brains." At the train station, Adriana was accompanied by her parents and Betty. Her friend kept looking around as if she was waiting for someone. And David was giving his daughter a final farewell. "You, daughter, when you get settled, call me right away. It's good that they'll give you a place to live. There's a shortage of doctors and teachers in the countryside. That's why they attract them with housing. It's okay. You'll work for a while and come back to town." "Dad, I'll definitely come back. And I won't give up photography. They say it's a wonderful place. There's room for creativity. Won't it be hard for you to get back into the profession?" "Dad, it's only been 2 years since I left school, so I remember everything. The main thing is that you don't worry about me. Citizens, passengers, please take your seats according to your tickets. In 2 minutes, we'll be leaving." The conductor gave the attendants a disgruntled look. And at that moment, Adriana noticed Sebastian running on the platform, not paying attention to the indignation of the conductor. The man jumped into the car. Just in time. "Didn't Betty warn you?" "No." "What did she have to warn me about?" "I decided to take a little train ride. I'm in for a miracle too. You don't mind my company." While Adriana was recovering, the conductor came running. "Citizen, I'm talking to you. What's this unauthorized behavior? I don't want no tickets in the car." Sebastian smiled broadly. "I have a ticket." The woman asked incredulously for the 5th carriage. Imagine being in the 5th. Honestly, I myself did not expect that I was given a ticket at the ticket office in that particular carriage, where such a pretty flight attendant. Compliments melt the heart. Women, you have me confused with a stewardess, and I'm more and more afraid of the sky on the ground. Sebastian walked confidently into the compartment and helped Adriana carry in her luggage. You just don't think about anything bad. When you have black thoughts in your head, life also has a dark streak. Sebastian, but why the sacrifice? You don't know. No. I've loved you since the first day I saw you. Don't say anything. And you listen to me. I don't want anything from you, and I'll never interfere in your life if you want me to. You're hounding me. But as long as you're in a difficult position, I have to protect you. I think any decent man would do the same. The train picked up speed, taking Adriana to the unfamiliar town of Chodova. She didn't know what awaited her there, but she believed that all troubles were in the past. And she also thought about the fact that she was running away from her failed love. But by pure coincidence, Sebastian, who has been in love with her for a long time, is next to her. David glanced unhappily toward the kitchen. He had just had another unpleasant conversation with his mother, and he was trying to control his emotions. Remembering the coach's advice, he repeated aloud, "I close my eyes and take 3 deep breaths. 1, 2, 3. David, are you reading something? I hope you're not holding a dangerous object." The boy again looked unkindly in the direction his mother's voice was coming from. "Mom, you think I'm an idiot and talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old. Adriana realized that contradictions were stirring in her son's soul. She approached him and tried to hug him. But the teenager pulled away, muttering something inaudible and to himself. Adriana looked at her son and marveled at how quickly he had grown up. The constant workload and hobby left almost no free time. That's why Sebastian took care of her son almost from the first day of his birth. But now he was gone. Adriana shifted her gaze to the photo in the morning frame. Sebastian was smiling broadly, as if sending them and David greetings. From such a recent past, the son followed his mother's gaze. "I'll probably never get used to the idea that my father is gone. He was the main person in my life. Of course, Mom, you're the main thing too, but Father. That's why I don't want to leave here." Adriana felt her throat suddenly dry. Tears spontaneously flowed from her eyes. "David, I don't want to leave either, but you and I need a change of scenery. Life goes on, and you and I have to live," the boy said thoughtfully. "And Dad always said that life is an obligation, not a gift to be spent at will. You know, Mom, when I go to his grave, it makes me feel better. I often feel like he's there to hear me. Son, Daddy really does hear everything, and he's watching over you and me. And he would be very unhappy with your mood right now. Believe me, he'll always be there for you. Even in Moscow, anywhere in the world, son, I miss my daddy too. You have no idea how empty my heart is. He did so much for me and you. It's a pity that such people leave us so early." Adriana cried, and David tried to comfort his mother. "Don't cry. I won't get on your nerves anymore. I promise. If you say we should leave, I won't object. It's just a pity. Friends and a new school I don't want to go to. It's the last year left." Adriana didn't want to tear the boy down at first either, but she had to make a tough decision. Because of his father's illness, David came down with a serious illness. The mother couldn't cope alone. "David is another loss I just can't physically bear. My father has always been and remains, as you put it, the most important person to me. And I'm asking you to understand." David understood his mother perfectly. He liked his grandfather very much himself. although his relationship with his grandmother was quite tolerable. Only Grandma was overprotective of her grandson, and Grandpa talked to him as an equal. He liked to spend his summer vacations at the Dakshat in the Moscow region, where the old people grew all sorts of useful vegetation. His father had bought this small but very cozy house for them. David was very young at the time, but I remember well how the old people thanked their son-in-law for such a generous gift. Sebastian, we don't even have words. We have worked all our lives, but could not save for a summer house. And you gave us such a royal gift. Sebastian laughed then. Tsars usually gave their subjects whole villages. They also gave them noble status for their services. I only gave you a small house. I grew up without parents. My grandmother raised me, but she's long gone. So you're the only relatives I have. David was packing his things, but his mind was on something else. The guy was trying to understand why things in life don't work out the way he wants them to. Adriana was also trying to answer that question. The parallels that her father used to talk about when she was in despair and thought that her life was over. Sebastian appeared. He left the capital for her and moved to the provinces. When he found out she was going to have a child, he did not hesitate and said, "You can rely on me. I will never hurt your child, and I will treat it as my own." Sebastian kept his promise. For the first time in Chudovo, they lived as ordinary neighbors. They married when David was 4 years old. Only after Sebastian's death, Adriana realized that the years lived with him were the happiest. They say that misfortune comes from where you don't expect it. Sebastian had always maintained a healthy lifestyle. He ran every day, went to the gym, and took up residence in the winter. There were his successes in business, so the family lived large. But one day, the man returned from a business trip with a high fever. Adriana, he must have gotten some kind of infection on the trip. You give me some heat pills and it'll go away. But the next day, Sebastian got worse. He started choking. They had to call an ambulance. For a week, doctors fought for the life of the patient, who was diagnosed with bilateral blue pneumonia. They assured Adriana, "Your husband has a strong organism. He will surely cope." But the doctor's predictions failed. On the 5th day, his kidneys failed. And another 24 hours later, Sebastian was gone. When Adriana got the call from the hospital, she couldn't believe it. How could it be? There must be some mistake. The doctor said that the man was a strong organism, but here it was a banal pneumonia. The nurse's sad voice replied, "I'm sorry, but sometimes healthy people die of the common cold." 2 months had passed since Sebastian's death. Adriana Lisa couldn't get used to the fact that he was gone. Everything in their spacious apartment reminded her of him. A favorite chair in the living room, a small gym on the loggia, even room slippers. In the former place awaited the appearance of the master. Living in such an environment was unbearable, and Adriana began to think about moving. Her father's sudden illness accelerated the process. But the most striking was that shortly before the death of her husband, Adriana was offered to organize a solo exhibition of her work in one of the capital's Adriaperi. And the other day she was informed that the event would take place in a month. This was another reason to move. Adriana could not miss such a chance because Sebastian had invested too much in promoting her talent. Adriana had already had several successful exhibitions abroad. The first time was almost by chance. Sebastian had a visiting partner from Switzerland. They decided to sit at Sebastian's home. As soon as the partner entered, he was lost. He spent more than an hour wandering from picture to picture, which were hanging everywhere. Some he stopped at for long periods of time. Some he looked at quickly. "Tell me, Sebastian, where'd you get this? It's not commercial, and I can see that." Sebastian smiled. His partner used to live here, and when the bad years came, he worked as a farmer, and after saving some money, he went abroad, where he continued to make a fortune. Which, by the way, he did quite well. This is Adriana, my wife. She is very fond of photography. She studied it. But unfortunately, in this city, there is almost no opportunity to turn around, although she has so many works that will be enough for more than one exhibition. That's when the proposal to start conquering the world from abroad was made. The very first exhibition was there. Sebastian laid out a round sum to help in the organization. even though the partner offered to do everything himself. And then exhibitions, sales, rave reviews. Sebastian believed in her the most, and she didn't let him down. Adriana was offered several times to take photos for the most fashionable international magazines, but for this she had to live abroad. She refused without regret. She belonged here in her homeland. Kevin waited outside Kelly's gymnasium and kept glancing at his watch to see where she was being carried. "I'm running out of time." More recently, the wayward Kathy had handed over the reins of the holding company to her son after his marriage to Lisa. The daughter of his mother's best friend decided to merge the two companies. At first, experts took this bold venture disapprovingly. How can you combine such different spheres of activity? But adamant in such matters, Kathy still insisted on her own. After Kevin's marriage, her relationship with her son warmed. The birth of her granddaughter, Kelly, finally melted the heart of the iron businesswoman. But Kevin could not forget Adriana for a long time. He experienced her departure hard and was very sorry that he had acted with her out of conscience. He tried to find her, but it was too late. Adriana's response to his call was harsh. "Don't ever call me or try to meet me. You don't exist for me anymore." Kevin had prepared an explanatory speech in advance, but the girl wouldn't even listen to him. Of course, he dialed the familiar number several more times, but the colorless voice of the operator answered him all the time. "The number you dialed does not exist." Kevin realized that Adriana had changed the number. He didn't dare to visit the girl's parents because it was embarrassing to look into the eyes of David. The wedding with Lisa was more like an elaborate torture than a happy event. The bride laughed with joy and talked nonstop the whole time. In the midst of the celebration, Kevin for a moment thought that in the crowd of guests flashed a familiar figure of a girl with a camera. He roughly pushed Lisa's hand away and rushed off in search of his Adriana. His act then was condemned by all the ladies present. Therefore, married life with an unloved girl did not go well from the very first day. Kevin carefully avoided privacy with his wife. She reproached him for failure to fulfill his marital duty. Once he spied his wife drunk to the point of unconsciousness, and in this form appeared in her bedroom. Details of that night Kevin did not remember, but a month later Lisa, with happy smiles, told him about the pregnancy. After parting with Adriana, Kevin stopped thinking about his words and actions. He treated other people in the same way. Indifferently, he took the news that he would soon become a father. Everything changed when he first picked up the pink cool envelope with a tiny creature in it. A heart. Men shuddered at something. It was as if a volcano that had been sleeping for centuries had awakened. Kevin spent every spare minute by his young daughter's crib. He made funny faces at her and enjoyed Kelly's long, hearty laugh. The girl grew up in his arms, learning to talk and walk. And he watched his baby lovingly. Lisa was openly jealous of his daughter. "Kevin, I get the impression you're doing all this on purpose to annoy me. After all, who's the mom in this family? Me or you? Why are you so annoyed that I pay attention to my daughter?" Lisa grinned caustically. "That's what surprises her, that you pay no attention to me at all. You even skimp on simple human words. And I, like any normal woman, need affection and love." But Kevin Lisa could not overpower himself and treat his wife more gently. Lisa felt it and also began to avoid his company. The situation was resolved when the wife's mother decided to move to her son in London. Christina all her life dreamed of visiting the capital of Great Britain. And now her youthful dream has finally come true. No sooner had Lisa seen her mother off than she declared, "I have to go to London too. My mom has health problems. I'm afraid for her." Kevin was very surprised by his wife's plans. "But your brother is there. He'll look after the old lady." Lisa exploded like a snake bite. "Don't you talk about my mother in such a derogatory way. She's the envy of many young women." "Lisa, you're contradicting yourself. One minute you're talking about your mom's poor health. One minute you're saying she's a role model for others. You're inconsistent, and that's what worries me. I wonder why. Because it's characteristic of deviant people." This was already over the top for a blatant insult. Lisa burst into foul swear words. Kevin listened and laughed in her face. When Lisa had run out of eloquence, he calmly asked, "Will you sell it?" Lisa thought, not even embarrassed. Sure, let her stay with you for a while. She's too young for long trips. But a short trip turned into a permanent residence in London. At first, for the sake of decency, his wife still regularly sent short messages with smiley faces, and then began to call once a month. About 2 years ago, Lisa suddenly appeared in person. "Kevin, I'm sorry, but I've met a man with whom I immediately fell in love." Kevin replied indifferently, "Congratulations. What do you want me to do? Don't play dumb. I want a divorce, and of course I expect all the preferential treatment I'm entitled to." Kevin laughed heartily. "Lisa, you're not getting anything. My clever Kathy has done everything, so I can only willingly transfer the shares of the holding company to another person. One of those people is you, Lisa, and I'm sorry to be so frank. That was a low blow." Lisa's eyes widened in incomprehension. "But why?" "We have a daughter, Kelly. I came to get her." "Mom, I'm not going anywhere with you. I'm better off with Daddy." The arguing parents didn't notice how the girl slipped into the living room where the verbal battle was taking place. Lisa shouted, "You're all conspiring here, but I won't leave it like this. I am a mother and my daughter has to stay with me. Kelly is 13 years old now, and she should decide who she wants to stay with. She's made her choice, and you have to accept it." So nothing. Lisa drove back to London. Kevin was so absorbed in his memories that he didn't notice Kelly coming to the car. "Daddy, did you fall asleep in there?" "Sorry, my daughter. I was just thinking." The girl dived into the salon and capriciously noticed you. "Dad, do not understand. It drives me that you sit with such a face, as if you got into a parallel world." "You guessed it, Kelly, mine. I just had a similar experience. While I was waiting for you. How are you doing?" That's when the girl perked up. "Dad, you know there's a new kid in our gymnasium today who's so cute. And his outfit is cool. I wonder if he'll be in your class in the 11th grade. The girls told me in confidence that he has cool parents. What I don't get is how a dude from the suburbs has cool parents. I don't understand how a decent girl can be so rude. Oh, Dad, I almost forgot." The girls were saying that this new guy. "Mom's either an artist or a photographer. She's really cool. I'll find out more later and let you know if you're interested." "Daughter, I'm not interested in anything that occupies you." That evening, Kelly told her grandmother everything in detail. But Kathy was not at all interested in the unknown boy from the province, and she did not pay much attention to her granddaughter's words. David liked it very much. In the new school, his peers unexpectedly well received him, and his manner of dressing played no small part. A long time ago, 3 years ago, maybe more, when David was going out for a walk, Sebastian stopped him. "David, where are you going?" "I'm going for a walk." "Me and the guys will go to the embankment, sit, and you go like this." David didn't understand him. "What's wrong, Dad?" "But I think you're wearing yesterday's t-shirt, and those pants don't go well with it." David looked at himself and then asked Dad, "I'm not a girl. What difference does it make what I'm wearing?" "Well, yes, a t-shirt should be worn with a sporty style, or at least this one. But I don't think anyone's gonna pay that much attention. That one, you're wrong. I've always said it's right to treat a man for who he is on the inside. But if you remember the proverb, it starts with the clothes on your back. Think about it. Maybe you should meet a friend or girlfriend in your life today. Well, here are the most perfect ones, but they will pass you by because a person who disrespects themselves and their appearance may treat others the same way. You and I both know that's not true, and you're a good person, but they don't know that yet, right?" David thought a lot about that conversation. Sebastian had managed to convince him that a man should look decent at all times, not just when he wanted to. The guy didn't become a stylist, but he'd been trying to dress up ever since, stylishly fashionable. It turns out that it was not so difficult. Plus, his innate taste helped him a lot. The 2 weeks he'd already been going to his new school had flown by like a day. Yes, the guys in the capital were much more liberated. But David had long ago decided for himself that he had his own life line. He would not try everything just to seem cool. He had Sebastian in front of him. He has his grandfather. And both are worthy examples. When the class realized that David wasn't going to buckle down just to be on good terms with everyone. Logically, he should have been bullied. But that's where it made a big difference. The fact that David didn't come from an easy family, that they had money, and the mom's a celebrity. It seemed that David was more fashionable, smarter, and if he's rich, he's cooler. And the cooler one dictates the rules. Except David wasn't going to dictate anything. It turned out there was no one to fight with, so the guys just accepted David for who he was. They also respected him for having his own point of view, for knowing what he wants. Kelly, you're gonna break your eyes. Lissa stood next to her friend and looked at her mockingly. Kelly flinched. She hadn't noticed Lisa walk up. What are you talking about? I was just thinking. Of course you were. And all your brooding centered on the new guy. God, what's wrong with that? It's not like he's a freak to turn your back on. Besides, I've heard the guys say he's real, not an upstart. Well, I don't know how he's not an upstart like that. Lissa, are you crazy? How many times have I told you to watch your fashion sense a little bit? Why? Let other people do it. They're paid to do it. Lisa came from a very wealthy family. Her mother had a chain of large outliers that brought in a good income, and her father was a car salesman. When the mother realized that it would not be possible to instill taste in her daughter, she simply hired someone like a nanny who kept an eye on what the girl wore. How does that count? Yes, the money is not small, but some was necessary because the girl was not distinguished by special beauty, but the opinion, or rather, self-importance above the roof. Although, Lissa looked thoughtfully at David, who was standing at the window and talking to another guy. You're right, of course, he's very interesting. Kelly had always been a fun person to be around, and not just in class. In fact, she liked to experiment with things to keep her from getting bored. And she had an amazing ability to keep others involved and entertained. One thing that pleased Kevin was that so far these entertainments had been harmless. She gave Miranda a sly look. Lissa, let's get to know him better. Take him on a tour, tell him about Moscow. Are you crazy? Not at all. She grabbed Miranda and dragged her towards David, who was already alone. Lissa looked at her friend with frightened eyes and even forgot to resist. Hi. Kelly looked at the guy defiantly. David smiled. He had noticed this pretty girl a couple of days ago, and something told him that they would meet soon. And the girl just had a kind of cheerful, fun-loving vibe about her. How are you? We wanted to offer to take a walk and show you Moscow. Well, the most interesting parts of it, if you haven't already seen it all for yourself. Yeah, I kind of know Moscow. My grandparents live here. There was a look of disappointment on Kelly's face. He immediately added, but only at the level of a tourist. It is clear that I may not know about the existence of interesting places. Anyway, they got to know each other, got to talking. The change was big, but Kelly didn't even notice how the time passed. The bell rang, and the girl turned around looking for her friend. But Nikki wasn't there. David said, If you're looking for your girlfriend, she oriented herself back at the beginning of our conversation. Kelly sighed. Now she's going to take offense. Now she's going to take offense to what? She left on her own. No one chased her away. Kelly smiled. Okay, I'm going to run. David wanted to stop her to ask when the tour would be, but Kelly was already gone. He just shook his head and smiled. What girl? Lissa looked at Kelly with angry eyes. Nico, why did you run away? Kelly pretended to be genuinely interested in the question. Nico hissed angrily. And it's like you noticed I was gone. Lissa, don't start, but Lissa turned away resentfully. At another time, she would have even made sure to disgorge her. But now she didn't feel like it. She wanted to think about David and only him. For the rest of the day, the girls never made up. Kelly didn't insist. She could see Lisa was angry. After class, they went outside by the porch, shifting from foot to foot. David. Kelly, she waved cheerfully. Her dad was supposed to be waiting for her outside the gate, but she couldn't leave. Not without talking to David as well. Daddy, I'm going out with the girls tomorrow. What's that for? Tell me where you want to go. The driver will take you. But no, Daddy. We want to wander around old Moscow, give ourselves some kind of tour. Kevin wanted to be indignant, but then, looking carefully at his daughter, he suddenly smiled. I'd like to ask you one thing. If you're not going to walk the new guy, Kelly blurted out. His name is David, and not to walk him, but to show him the city. Realizing that she had given herself up, she clung to her father. "Daddy, he's so nice, so serious. He's new to the school, and already everyone respects him. Very interesting. Well, since he's all so positive, maybe after the tour, you'll come over for a cup of tea." Kelly shook his head apprehensively. "No, I know for a fact he won't go. Besides, why would he? I mean, we've only just met him. You know, Dad, he's a bit like you, isn't he? He's just as nice." Kevin could barely keep a straight face. I thought to myself, God forbid he should be like me. He'd been thinking about Adriana a lot lately. I wondered how his life would have turned out if he hadn't been so cowardly. Perhaps he would have been happier. But then he'd have nothing. On the other hand, maybe Kelly would have been born to him and Adriana. Mom hadn't made any more attempts to marry him after he'd been dumped by his nondescript wife, her protege. And lately, Kathy seemed to have calmed down a bit. A little tired, maybe. He let Kelly go, but before he did, he tried to gently remind her that she was still a child. But Kelly laughed back. "Daddy, what are you talking about? I know everything. And I need you to understand that David and I are just friends." Okay, I'm glad you're smart. And David did invite us over for a visit. You know, like this weekend. I need to know who my daughter's friends are. Adriana and Betty were sitting in a coffee shop. "Adriana, you have no idea how happy I am for you, and I'm so glad you're back like David. You know, Betty, when we got here, I was kind of scared. But the more we've been here, the more fun Dad's been. Mommy says it feels like we're on his medication." Betty said seriously. "Do you really think it could be any other way? The medicine is you, David. Is that all the joy he has left in his life? Parents don't get any younger, you know." "Yeah, I get it. It's just so hard to realize. So how's David? How's he doing at his new school?" "Adriana's revitalized. You know, I was so nervous about the last year of school, with the age of transition and all that. But it's going surprisingly well. He's excited about school, about his classmates. And the best part is, he's got some girl there. They go out almost every day. She shows him around Moscow. David says she's not only smart, but she's insanely beautiful." "Wow, isn't it a little early?" She laughed next. I said the same thing. And he made huge eyes and said they were just friends. I can see his eyes light up when he talks about her. Well, it's the early generation now. Who is? "Betty, do you really think I'm going to see them before I make inquiries? Why don't you tell me how you're doing? We haven't really talked much in all this time. Just bits and pieces. How's the new husband?" Betty laughed. "Adriana, what new husband? He's 3 years old, and I kicked him out. Betty was married for the 4th time. And as it turned out, not again." "How you put it out?" Adriana looked at her in surprise. "You said I love you, I can't, but I loved you so much. And that's enough." Betty stretched gracefully and bent over. And Adriana thought, well, Betty loves life and all of it. "Adriana, wherever you are. You know it won't be long before I'm in love again." The friends laughed. David took a good look at himself. "Mom, how are you?" Adriana came out of the kitchen. Grandma followed. "Well, it's good. Really good. Mom, it's true. Kelly's got some super rich family over there. David, if you're not confident in your abilities, maybe you shouldn't go to a stranger's house. Not for my mom. Her dad's very concerned. His desire to see me is very valid. He could just forbid Kelly from going out with me." Adriana smiled. "You're all grown up." Now David looked at her in embarrassment. "Can I invite Kelly over later too?" "Of course you can, but not until after the exhibition. It's in 3 days, so it won't be that long." Okay. Thank you." Kathy threw David a scathing glance, which Kevin immediately noticed. So Mom remembered that she was the boss. We'd have to take the initiative before she said something. He extended his hand to the guy, who, it should be noted, held it with dignity. "Kevin, nice to meet you." Kathy pressed his lips together, realizing his son's intent. But she was afraid to openly confront him. Kevin hadn't been listening to her lately. Kelly invited everyone to the table. David didn't eat much. He pretended to eat more. And Kevin asked David, "Hadn't you recently arrived in Moscow?" Yes, not long ago. Although my grandparents have always lived here, they are native Muscovites. At these words, Kathy's face softened a little. A native Muscovite is something that is not quite native people. She began to listen to the conversation. What do your parents do? My mom is an international class photographer. Her exhibitions were held in many countries. Her pictures are bought by magazines and people for a lot of money. And now for the first time there will be an exhibition in Moscow. And my mom was persuaded for a long time. She didn't agree. Dad insisted. But we thought that Mom would just go to the exhibition, and that's all. But circumstances were such that we had to move here. Kathy asked us right away, "Where do you live?" "At my grandparents' for now." But my mom already bought an apartment. It's being renovated. The woman raised an eyebrow. She had nothing against being friends with this guy now. Yes, well, Kelly was still young, but it looked like this David was the one to hold on to. Kevin immediately noticed the change of mood in his mother's demeanor, and for some reason he felt very disgusted. "David, where's the exhibit? Maybe Kelly and I could come and see it." "Oh, come, of course. I'll give you and Kelly the invitations tomorrow. You should come. I'll introduce you to my mom." Betty took over the reins from the host for old time's sake. It was decided that Adriana would not be introduced to the guests until the middle of the show. The organization was certainly top-notch. The first day of the exhibition was invite-only. That was the decision of the stewards, and Adriana didn't resist. She understood perfectly well that at first the business was organized light buffet with champagne and wine. People were mostly walking the halls. David, and Adriana's mom could see that people were excited. Now David was very proud of his mom, but also worried because there was still no Kelly. Finally, he saw her and went to greet her. Adriana came out into the hall as well. No one recognizes her because no one knows what she looks like. She walked over to the pictures that were taken years ago. It was Kevin. 10 pictures, none of them showed his face, just a silhouette. But that was the point. After all these years, the photos are still relevant. You look at them, and it's like you're in some kind of novel. I wonder if the man in the photo has something to do with the photographer or just a model? No, of course he does. You said yourself that the photos are as if they were alive. I even think they have a loving air about them. Adriana grinned sadly. That's true. At the moment when she was taking Kevin's picture, she loved him so much that she thought only of happiness. She stepped back, then walked off in the other direction altogether. Adriana could see perfectly well that these pictures always had a lot of people, 10 pictures of happiness. Kathy slowly made her way along the wall. Kevin thoughtfully supported her under his arm. "Kevin, you saw and the whole world is here." "Of course I did, Mom. I guess you like it a lot, don't you?" "Of course I do. Would our Kelly be so foolish as to miss such a party?" "Mom, I'm begging you. What are you talking about? Kelly is just a child." "What are you talking about? She's not such a child. Let her think about the future. It doesn't hurt anyone to marry some poor schmuck." "Mom, that's enough." Kevin gave her a stern look. "It's too early to be thinking about something like that. And then I want you to understand one thing. I'm not going to let you interfere with Kelly's life. It's bad enough you ruined it for me, and Kathy wanted to be outraged. She realized, of course, that Lissa was entirely on her conscience. But on the other hand, Kevin should have been grateful to her for keeping him away from that girl. But she had no time to intervene before she could voice her displeasure either. Kevin suddenly let go of her hand and took a few steps forward. He was looking at the pictures posted on a separate wall. They were large just enough to be seen from anywhere in the hall. Kevin quietly. Kathy looked at her son in surprise and shifted her gaze to where he was looking. Beautiful, very beautiful. Kathy had respected few people in her life. Few people she praised. But these pictures stirred something in her soul. But the more she looked at them, the more she was disturbed. "Kevin, I don't understand what's wrong here." "Son, what's wrong with you?" Kathy, but she saw her son turn pale. "Mom, do you know who's in these pictures?" "No, of course not." "How would I know?" Kevin didn't notice Kelly and David walking up to them. No one saw the kids yet. They were holding hands. David listened to Kevin with interest. He, too, was seeing these pictures for the first time, though he had always followed his mom's work. "Mom, it's me." Many, many years ago, Adriana was taking pictures for a contest. She asked me to select the photos. These are the pictures, and I chose them myself. Kathy looked at her son. "Are you saying that's a picture of that girl? But it just can't be. She was a simple person and would never have achieved anything. I can see right through people." Kathy was frantic when she thought of Lisa, but then she went on. "What's there to guess?" She turned to David, who stood with an impenetrable face. "David, what is your mother's name?" Only then did she realize what a stupid thing he had said. To come to the exhibition without even asking who the person who had done all this was. "My mom's name is Adriana." Kathy stared at David in silence, uncomprehending. Kelly let go of the boy's hand, and Kevin just turned pale. Adriana stood with Betty. "Adriana, you're doing great. I thought people were just going to show off to each other today. But after 15 minutes, everyone was looking at your work, and they were talking about it so much. And those old photos over there are always crowded. Look, there's an argument going on right now." David and his Kelly, their Adriana, turned that way and suddenly stopped. Her son was standing in front of his own father and the hated Kathy. "Oh, Betty, I have to go over there." "David, there's Kevin and his mom." Betty darted her eyes how. But Adriana was already rushing over there. Her mind was blank. The last thing she expected was to see people she would rather never see here. She walked over and stood behind Kevin and Kathy. The woman was still indignant. "This can't be happening. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. We just need to meet the author of these works. We already have." Kathy, she even jumped up and then only turned around. "It's you." Kevin turned even more slowly. He already recognized that voice. He could already hear his heart going crazy, somewhere in Adriana's chest. What it took for her to keep her expression the same as it had been before, no one knows. "Hello, Kevin." David raised his eyebrows. "Mom, do you two know each other?" "Yes, son. It's been a long time since we've known these people. I'd like to talk to you." She took her son under her arm and led him away. Kelly stood alone, confused. Kevin stared after Adriana, and Kathy put Valadol under her tongue. "Mom, where are you taking me?" "Kelly's waiting for me." Adriana stopped. She didn't know how to explain everything to her son. "Son, I don't want you to go out with Kelly. It's not gonna work out anyway." "Mom, what the hell are you talking about? I didn't think you were like that." "David, I don't care what you thought. But you have to tell Kelly that you're not going out anymore and that we're going somewhere else." David looked at his mother and just didn't understand what was wrong with her. They always got along, always talked. But here Mom just averted her eyes and repeated the same phrase for the second time. "Adriana, what's going on?" Adriana's parents, and almost simultaneously, Kevin came up to them. David looks at the man in surprise, and this one does something. "Hello, David." "Adriana, we need to talk." She looked up at him. "I don't need to. So I'm sorry. You better go." She looked out the window. There was already a party going on outside, and David was gone. Finally, the door slammed. He went into the kitchen, turned on the light. "Mom, what are you doing out here alone in the dark?" "David, were you with Kelly?" "Yeah, we went to the movies." "Mom, you don't know her at all." "She's great. And if you have a problem with her family, what does that have to do with us?" "I believe she's great, but you can't date. You can be friends, but that's all you can do." "The name David." "Kelly is not the right girl for you." "Mom, why not?" "I don't understand. What's wrong with her?" "Everything about her, that's what's wrong with us." "Well, it's you." "Mom, you can speak more clearly." David and Kelly had their first kiss today, and David knew there was no force that could pull him and Kelly apart. He couldn't think about anything at all, only the fact that it wouldn't be long now. He and Kelly would be married, and they would be together forever. Adriana could see that her son was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. She realized that she would have to tell the truth. "David, Kelly, and you are related. You are brother and sister. And Kevin is your father. A long time ago, he chose money over love. Kathy insulted me and said that someone like me was no good for her son." David looked at his mother in horror. "Mom, but I had a dad." You had the most wonderful daddy in the world who loved you more than life. But Kevin's biological father. David jumped up and ran out of the apartment. Adriana rushed after David's stop, but the guy didn't even look behind Adriana. Adriana's parents jumped out. What happened? They waited for David all night. Toward morning, an exhausted Adriana called the police. A sleepy voice told her to come back in 3 days. David put another pill under his tongue. Adriana, we need to call Kevin. He has a lot more opportunity in this town now anyway. Adriana silently picked up the phone. The clock read 5 o'clock. She dialed the number. Who is this, Kevin? It's me, Adriana. On the other end of the phone, Adriana's confusion lasted a second. Is something wrong? Yeah, Kevin's missing David. I told him he can't date Kelly because they're brother and sister. Kevin, help us find our son. Another second of silence. And Kevin said in a husky voice, I'll be right there. He arrived half an hour later. He had some men with him. They took pictures of David, questioned Adriana. What was he wearing? Another half hour later, the doorbell rang. David came back with Kelly. She immediately lashes out at Adriana. I didn't realize you were like this. I really liked you. I could never understand people who forbid their children to be happy. My grandmother told me how badly she and Daddy treated you. But it's despicable to retaliate like that. Adriana even smiled. Good girl. She couldn't say it all back then. But Kelly, even though she's younger, did. Kevin, do you want me to explain to Kelly, or do you? Kevin looked at Kelly darkly. Daughter, here's the thing. David is my son. Kelly went pale. Staggered? No, this can't be happening. We decided to get married as adults. Dad, how can that be? Kevin didn't have time to answer. His cell phone rang in his pocket. Where is it? Don't touch it. We'll be right there. He jumped up and drove on the spot. We'll figure it out. David was sitting on a high railroad bridge. When Adriana saw him, her heart thumped loudly, loudly. If he took just a couple steps down, there was a real abyss and trains. Kelly rushed to him, sat down next to him, and took his hand. David, we can be friends, I guess. And she cried, resting her head on his shoulder. David put one arm around her, pulling her close to him. Kevin sat down too, and Adriana came over. Kevin spoke. We all need to listen to me to unravel this tangle. I'm the only one to blame for what happened all those years ago. I'm the one who was cowardly. The truth is, I didn't know Adriana was having a baby. Mom quickly married me to Lisa. And I thought about Adriana all the time. I couldn't have lived with Lisa if it hadn't been for Kelly. Kelly was everything to me. And then Lisa left, and it turned out she was gone for good. And Kelly gets sick. Remember Kelly, you even had to go to the hospital? I do. The girl exclaimed. And that's where I found out that the girl had a blood type that neither me, Lisa, nor my grandparents had. I don't even know why I took that test. Anyway, I never would have said it. But now I have to. Kelly is not my own daughter. Lisa must have gotten pregnant on purpose to keep me around. Or maybe she didn't even know it wasn't mine. Admittedly, I was being a pig about it. Kelly and David stared at him in amazement, and Kevin continued. Kelly, I'm sorry, but I love you like family. And I really hope nothing changes in our relationship. Here. So there are no obstacles to you and David dating, except for one thing. You're both still in high school. Kelly threw herself on his neck. Daddy, Daddy, thank you. I love you very much and will always consider you my daddy. High schoolers. We actually decided to get married after high school. Kevin remembered her, and then he held her to him and David. Adriana wiped her tears. Mom, come to us. They sat like that for a long time, the four of them hugging each other. And when the sun began to rise, Kevin said decisively, I suggest that we go to the campgrounds this weekend. The four of us, or we could take our parents. I know it's impossible to forgive me, but I'd like to try. Kevin glanced at Adriana. She averted her eyes, but her heart throbbed. Mom, let's take Grandma and Grandpa, and Kelly's grandmother too. It had been so long ago after all, you have to learn to live without resentment. Adriana waved her hand. Let's go, son. Of course you're right.
subscribe, and click the bell.
Julia. She had long ago gotten used to the fact that some envious people in the village called her a cripple. What can I say? A wheelchair has never made anyone look good. Well, what could she do then? She vaguely remembered the time when she was young and happy with her own husband. Peter, the couple married in their 3rd year of medical school. She an up-and-coming internist, he a dentist, the hope, so to speak, and the brightest minds in medicine, but had lived together for a long 5 years after their marriage. When Julia was walking home from work one evening and met her old friend, Tony, her first childhood love, with whom she lived in the same house, though on different floors, and with whom she had spent her entire childhood, her school years. And then you met him and married him. Tony often blamed her for Julia marrying Peter and moving to another town. Tony, but you know I love him. And you're my best friend. I invited you to the wedding, by the way, and you never showed it up. Who's supposed to take offense to that? Come on, you know how I feel about your husband, don't you? I don't. After what he did to you on the 3rd or 5th date, I'm sorry, but you should have thought about it by now. And really, Peter went crazy on the 5th date. He got jealous of Tony and raised his hand to the girl in front of witnesses. She only got a slap on the wrist, but maybe Tony's right. She should have thought about it from the start. Is her boyfriend really that good? Is this toxic relationship worth continuing? Tony, let's just change the subject. I just came over for tea and to talk about life. How are you doing anyway? Yeah, I'm good. Yesterday, my boss offered me the job of chief accountant. And I'm still thinking yes or no. What's there to think about? You'll be counting my money later. Yeah, you tell me, when was the last time you were at work or after your husband beat you up and made a scene at work? Did you quit? Yeah, that incident set the line between Julia and Tony. Although what to say, the girl from the first day won the respect and trust of both her patients and superiors, senior doctors, kindness, ability to spread to herself, and listen to many knowledge and ability to accurately diagnose. All this made her popular among old ladies. Yes to her, Julia. There is a clue lined up for you again, the superintendent used to say to her when she was making her morning rounds. Yes, Julia, again I'm without lunch and will sit until evening. But you understand, I know that besides me no one will listen to them, will not believe. Pressure will not prescribe the right treatment. Yes, I have an old man here. And so he comes to me every day like to work, all because he lives alone and has no one to talk to. Julia, you're doing great. And Julia blossomed at work among the old guys in the women's group. But apparently, Peter thought otherwise and saw his girlfriend, and then his wife blossom before his eyes. Even in such a seemingly backward society. Julia, confess, you have a lover at work. Is it a young grad student or a new doctor? Peter, don't be silly. You're the only man I have, the first and the last. You're all I have. And she reached out to him for a kiss. But the man pushed her away and slapped her across the face. Yes, so hard that Julia hit her head on the door jamb and fell, hitting the corner of the table. The consequences were most unfortunate. Bruising, concussion, ER and ICU, and then she was fired from her job. She just couldn't work there. She couldn't stand the slanted stares of her coworkers, the pitying, wailing of her patients. And Julia had become disgusted with herself. Where did I go wrong? How could I let it be thought that I had a lover? Tony, help me out here. Julia, just get away from him. Come to my place. I've got a 3-bedroom, I live by myself. Vaughn, really with a cat. I'll give you a room. What are you holding on to Peter for? She didn't know what kept her with that man. Is it attachment, love, or desire? What desire to be a mother? Maybe it's a good thing she lost the baby after that blow. Otherwise, she simply did not know how to live her life. Then this word often came up in her vocabulary, but in no way helped to determine the future. Maybe she should divorce Peter, move in with Tony, and go back to work when the bruises and abrasions went away. Julia had been stupid to say that out loud, naively assuming that no one was home. Peter called her in the evening and said that after work he was going to a bar with his friends to have a beer and let her do what she wanted. It's happened a lot in the last 6 months. constant drunkenness of the husband, his delays at work, meetings with girls. And it wasn't always coworkers, more and more often prostitutes. But on this particular evening, he came home early and heard something that wasn't meant for his ears. I wonder if that's the Tony who's your housemate. Peter, you're home early. I wasn't expecting you, I'm sorry. I didn't even have time to heat up dinner. Yeah, I can see you weren't expecting that. I'm surprised you managed to get your lover Tony out of the house. Must have been the bed. Yeah, well, that's a coincidence. When her husband heard something that wasn't meant for him, and strangely enough, Juliet actually changed the linens before he arrived and threw them in the wash. It was an evening she would remember for a long time. The blow to the face, the fall, then the bump against the corner of the table and the ambulance crash, and then Tony the wheelchair and the incomprehension of how she could have gotten to this point. Julia, you should not despair. You are a doctor yourself, and you know very well that you can still get back on your feet. Tony was with her the whole time she was in the hospital, sitting by her side, spoon-feeding her, reading books, taking her for walks in a wheelchair. The doctors themselves did not understand how it could be that a young and healthy girl could lose her legs from a trivial fall. How could she lose her legs? They just stopped listening to her. She was fine. They said the bruises would go away sooner than her stomach, and she'd be back on her feet. Come on, Ethan, thanks for the encouragement. But I'm a medical professional myself, and I realize that when you're nervous, your legs can fail. So we just have to wait it out. And Julia, I gave you a sick leave so you wouldn't lose your job and have some money, and there. And if anything, I'll get a pension and go somewhere in the village to fresh air and fresh milk. With such words, she consoled herself, but she understood perfectly well she could not stand on her feet, and all her life would be confined to a wheelchair. That's how her husband ruined her youth, her health, and her desire to become a mother. When Peter beat her, Julia was pregnant. She didn't know it yet, but her husband's hand aborted her, robbing her of the joy of motherhood. It was later that she found out that while she was out, the doctors had given her a clean bill of health. I'm sorry, she's not you, you know. It was a little early. And how would you bear a pregnancy now? How would you raise a child? The girl herself did not know how she could just survive, bear, give birth, just to take care of the baby. What to say to all this? Maybe it's true that everything turned out that way then. After all, if Peter was raising his hand on her, then surely the baby would suffer as well. She just nodded her head and, turning the stroller, drove out of the chief physician's office. Her colleagues supported her, some with money, some with food, some just dropped by for a 5-minute chat. But Tony, it's not the same communication. It's not the same life I used to have. It's all that to me. Don't tell me you're sick of it and you're gonna go headfirst. But at the very least, off a bridge and into a river. What about me? You'll leave me to my fate, to the mercy of my accountants. Her friend could always cheer her up, if only for a moment, but it would make her smile. Although it was just Tony, whom Julia did not perceive as a man, as a lover and husband, although she realized he would be faithful not only as a friend, but also as a loving husband, a wonderful father, and even an excellent lover. Why did she think so? I myself did not understand. I'd never even slept with him once in my life. Life had given them only one kiss, but that was it. A friend, nothing more. Tony, I don't know how I'm supposed to go on. Just sitting in my mom's 3-bedroom apartment like this. Going from room to room in a stroller, looking out the window and enjoying the sunshine. I'm just going crazy. And it's only summer. What happens when fall and winter come? I'll go crazy. Julia, I take it you don't want to come to me. Then I'll give you another idea. My grandmother left me a house in the country. True, it's not an apartment with Euro renovation, but the structure itself is good. There's a stove. And by the way, it'll be great for your spine and legs. Then there's water. By the way, it's brought into the kitchen, though it's cold. Then there's a small vegetable garden, but a huge garden. And Tony smiled at his memory of spending all his summers at his grandmother's house. Those were the best days of his life. He would run with his friends to the river, fish at the local lake. Paris apples in the garden were his breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And how good was sleep in the hayloft? And how good was the bread from the oven? Tony, I'm not much of a villager. Me and the village. Who will bring me firewood? Who will bring me groceries? I don't know. Maybe I'll get sick. And then what? Well, you're a doctor yourself. And by the way, there's a neighboring village in need of a therapist. You know, in villages, doctors are a luxury. Will you be needed there? You'll be welcomed with open arms. The chairman has a car. He'll drive you around if necessary, and he'll buy food and bring it himself. I don't even know, though I'm sick of sitting around. I've been at home for the second year without any progress. And Julia shrugged her shoulders, tormented by doubts. I'm tired of sitting at home, but to go to the village as a doctor. Will she be able to cope? Who will help her? If anything, where? Who would want to take an invalid? Tell me, how does your disability affect your ability as a brilliant therapist? It doesn't. Patients come in, they tell you everything. You listen to their blood pressure, send them for tests, and then diagnose them. You're a brilliant diagnostician. To you, people sign up for 6 months in advance. The girl tilted her head with a smile. Yes, it was so long ago that she couldn't even remember. And Tony put his hand on her palm, resting on the warm shoulders that were wrapped around her legs, and looked into her eyes. Let's make a deal like this while it's fall-winter and still March. I think you'll stay at home. Replenish your knowledge of medicine. What and how. But in April, I'll take you to the village, show you the house. Then I'll introduce you to the head of the local village council and show you the outpatient clinic. And then it's up to you. What do you want to do? I agree. Julia nodded and mentally imagined herself a village doctor. On the one hand, what does she have to lose? And so the job is a change of scenery, a salary after all. And the small disability pension she receives is not enough. And the girl nodded her head. It was good that at least she had him, or without Tony she would be completely lost. She didn't know what to do. Tony, I agree, but I don't think it will work out. That's a good idea. I'm handicapped. No. And the girl is a wonderful person and a professional. And just because you're in a chair, it doesn't mean anything to me. Tony, don't be ridiculous. You're a young, handsome guy, but why do you need me and what are you going to do? I won't give you an heir. I'll be a burden. Even though you're my friend, I won't be a burden to you. All right, I'll put it another way. If you were walking, you'd be with me, you'd leave Peter. If I walked, I'd leave him. I'd be naked. And then Julia cried. After all, about the fact that she lost a child and in the future, most likely, will not be able to have children. She hadn't told anyone. And now the memories came flooding out. There was no way she could stop the tears. A friend, don't shed tears for one fool. He's not worth it. I'm not talking about Peter Lou tears. Tony, you know I haven't told anyone. You see, I can't have kids. Well, not like that. When Peter hit me and I fell, I had a miscarriage. But it was so small, I didn't know I was pregnant. The doctors cleaned it up, of course, but I'm just not sure I can get pregnant. You don't know, or that's what the doctors told you based on the test results. Toll, I'm an excellent diagnostician who can even diagnose himself. And I understand that even if you conceive, how to carry the baby. And who'd want to take a handicapped person? Only a pervert, probably. Julia, you must have really hit your head that hard then, on all your brains. I like you. Don't you realize that? And I want to be with you. Even if you spend the rest of your life spinning the wheels of that wheelchair, I'll carry you in my arms. You can't conceive. Let's do the echo. It won't help the adoption. It'll just be with me. The words sounded so convincing that the girl looked at her old friend for the first time. On the other side, as a man. She, wiping the tears from her face, took a tissue and blotted it again with water under the tap face. Tony, are you really, really serious about this? Is there any other way? Or do you know me? It wasn't the first day, but she closed her eyes and rested her head on the back of the stroller, touching her head to the cold tile. It helped her to collect her thoughts, to focus, to realize from scratch to herself what she really cared about, what her exhausted body and soul wanted. Tony, I am grateful for your help and all that you have done and are doing. But let's not rush things. I need to figure things out on my own. She opened her eyes and looked at the guy who sat across from her and smiled his charming smile. Julia instinctively reached out to him and pinched both cheeks, but just like a small child. Yes, in fact, he was a little boy to her. Even though he was only a week younger than her, that's fine. Now let's get dressed and go for a walk. It's a beautiful September. We shouldn't miss what nature has to offer. It was a beautiful fall day, which Julia remembered for a long time. Because today she was reborn anew, looked at Tony in a new way, realized that she was still alive and that she could be, even if not as a mother, but as a wife and a friend and a specialist. It was not without reason that she had studied for almost 6 years, and she had a lot of practice. A lot of people talk about her as a great professional. "Tony, you know what I was thinking," the girl said when the guy brought her home. "I guess I'll go into my old job this week and ask for a practice to restore my knowledge. I'll wash ducks and take test tubes if I have to. You don't need legs for that kind of work, but hands. You see, you're starting to think soberly, and everything will come to your senses. As for Peter, my advice to you is to sue him. No, you know what happened last year. The statute of limitations expired. That's what my chief of staff told me at work. Although, like you advised me to sue my husband. But I'll be honest, Peter was helping me out with money at the time. Yeah, and he crippled you. Okay, Julia, it's up to you. You're a smart girl." Yes, I am, Julia thought. When she washed in life under a stream of warm water, in the converted shower she went to sleep. If she was smart, she would definitely not allow that he raises his hand on her. Although what's done is done, you have to live with it, dearie. She didn't let Anya go. She's a wreck on the beach. And you're all at my wedding. The girl lay on the bed and thought maybe and really divorce Peter to live in the village, develop legs, and maybe even get pregnant. With whom? Anyone, even my old friend. There aren't many men around. I'm still young and attractive, and I'll get on my feet. So with these thoughts, she closed her eyes and instantly blacked out. She fell into a deep sleep without noticing. That night, she was running along the same beach again. Like back in first grade, when she was given a trip to the sea from the school. How blissful was that? To run on the sand like that, her feet, and we were languidly on the warm sea. And all around was sun, wind, and freedom. The girl didn't notice how she woke up crying. Her pillow was wet, and the clock showed only 3 o'clock. Julia rose on her arms and looked out the window. The moon was accurately illuminating her bed, and in its rays the fall leaves were twirling. It was like a waltz when 1, 2, 3, and twirled in a magnificent dance to the brilliant melody of Bach or Schubert. She adored music and more than once put at home records Soviet old turntable devalued around the room. But it annoyed Peter, although the girl herself did not understand why. Why does it annoy you? It's a classic. That's what annoys the classics. And I'm not all of them. I will never be like the common herd of sheep. I'm unique and special. And one day, in a fit of rage, he smashed her old record player, stomped on the records with his feet. And she stood there and watched and couldn't do anything. She didn't understand why. She just stood there and watched her hobbies being trampled on. And now she understood it was a kind of dependence on her husband, a manifestation of love, a sacrifice to her executioner. And Derry got something. Probably a new blank sheet of paper from which to write her future. And she lay down again, just turning the pillow wet side down. So what if it was wet? Tears are water, and water has a way of drying up and evaporating. And you, Peter, are definitely out of my life. Enough. Julia moved to a small village in the middle of April and did not regret it for a minute. Yes, it turned out to be quite a picturesque place, just as Tony had promised. A small house, but quite sturdy and cozy with 2 rooms and a hall, kitchen, and entrance hall. A large garden behind it, and around it endless fields covered with the first green grass. After the urban metropolis, it seemed like some other unreal world. Well, you're a lucky girl. Spring is early and warm this year, even without rain. By the way, here are the keys to the gate of the house. Keep and possess. And be your rightful owner, if I was on my feet. But I'm not much of a hostess, am I? There's a huge garden, and a vegetable garden. They need care and supervision. What can I do? You can keep your spirits up and at least look after it. picked the fruit. And nature is like that. You know, smart aunt, look and the tree will give birth. Julia smiled at her friend and put her face under the warm spring breeze and the first real rays of sunshine. How nice is it here? It's not her apartment, where she was locked up like in a prison and didn't want to see anything or anyone. Now she could have a cat in the house. Maybe even some chickens. What's in there? She can feed them. And then there's the truth. What kind of household would have more rabbits? Can she buy milk from the neighbors? Tony, you know, I want to have chickens here, even a cat. And then you can help me with that. No problem. Come on, I'll introduce you to the head of the village council first. He, by the way, I saw in the car, came to the local medical center. And there on the spot we will organize and chickens, and firewood, and help around the house. The house is fine, but the yard should be cleaned up. Everything is overgrown. There the bushes grew wildly. Let's go. That's all later. Already on the spot at the local medical center I saw her. I noted that everything here is done quite well and clean to the best of my ability, and the equipment is not new, but working. The medicines are stacked properly, right? You can feel the hand of the manager, which pleased her immensely. So we'll work together, she thought. Tony, hi. What brings you here? The voice of a short, stocky man distracted the girl from her inner musings. Andrew, I brought you a general practitioner. If you take Julia under your care and protection, Andrew, the local council leader, will help you with everything. Good afternoon, the lovely Julia. I'm delighted to meet you and also delighted that we'll have our own therapist. Because you know how poorly we have it in this area. It's horrible. 2 nurses and a driver. That's the whole staff. How do you manage? Julia, I was genuinely surprised at the way the work is done here and how people manage without proper training. Beautiful Julia, I'm ready to carry you in my arms. Just stay with us. You're our salvation and our help. You're already settled in, by the way. Andrew naively thought she had already agreed. But how can you work in such a mode and with such a set? Julia just didn't understand and already inwardly doubted whether she should stay here. But she was not used to giving up, so she smiled at the head of the village council and simply said, Yes, Tony has taken me in his house, but I really need your help to organize the yard. It's overgrown. I need wood to clean the stove, and so to speak, my personal request, if you can, chickens and a ginger kitten. No problem, Julia. By lunchtime, you will have a man with mow the grass, clean the yard, then tomorrow we'll take care of firewood and stove, and they're smoothly moved to the garden. You have firewood for the first couple days? Yes, thank you. But we'll organize the chickens. We can ask around the neighbors. Didn't any of them grow up dry? My man will see the condition of the hen house, bring you some food, and we'll think about kittens. By the way, you would also need a small dog in the yard or in the house to run and bark like a bell. Julia smiled. It's true. Well, how in the village without a dog? No way. She already imagined how from the morning she would feed the hens, give porridge with dog's meat, how she would pet the cat and go to the garden to drink her morning coffee. No, her Julia shook her head and mentally already stayed here. After all, how stupid was she to have stayed in the city for so long? She should go to the air, to nature, develop her legs, and forget about Peter could already walk on her own 2 feet. I'm sorry, she's not up for anything you said. Andrew tilted his head closer so he could hear her better. No, I'm sorry, Andrew, it's nothing. Just thinking out loud. It's okay if I call you by your first name. I'd be happy for you to call me by my first name. That's so wonderful to hear. Andrew, from a girl like you. Come on, I'm not a girl anymore, and a wheelchair doesn't make me look good. You know, I've always been a sensible man. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The main thing is the mind, and the body is harmful. Excuse me, but how come Andrew shouldn't ask now? You'd better help the girl to get settled, and then you'll ask questions over a cup of tea. Tony made it clear to his head that the topic was delicate enough that he shouldn't be so gung-ho about the new therapist. Julia, I apologize if my question offended you. But you understand, we have a priest in the neighboring village, so he's talking about the beginning. Andrew, sorry, let's not talk about your mysticism. And all of a sudden, Tony tilted his head up to the sky and rolled his eyes. He had heard this story about the local priest from the head of his village more than once. They say he has the gift of healing, cures cancer, exorcises demons, and so on. People even come to him in droves, coming from cities and almost from neighboring countries. And here he is right next door. Just take it. Tony, that's where you're wrong. He gets people back on their feet, by the way. You should go to the temple. Oh, sorry, when you're settled in, I'll take you there. It's a beautiful place. Even artists come from the capital to sketch there. So you won't regret it. And communion with God, thank you. But probably a little later. And I can't say that I'm a particularly religious person. Doctors and priests are like two opposing camps, each with their own truth. Yeah, it's like Spartacus and Dynamo fans. I agree with you, dear girl, but still we come to it. But that's for later. Now let's go to my office. I'll feed you lunch and we'll talk about it. What do you want in the house and what do you want in your dispensary? It was near evening in the flooded house when Julia and Tony sat at the table and had dinner. We discussed working points, what was needed, how much, how to organize the work. It was like that. Tony, it's all so cool. I haven't felt this good since I entered the Institute and met Peter. But she immediately faltered when she read the grimace of displeasure and misunderstanding on Tony's face. Yes, Isabella, the way he used to raise his hands at you. And he probably wanted to say that it was probably his fault she was in a wheelchair now. But he didn't. He felt sorry for hurting and so exhausted both soul and body. So he just got up and walked out of the room into the yard. It was so desirable to smoke. But the guy gave up this habit about 3 years ago, although a pack of cigarettes in his bag or in his car was always there. He went back to the car and rummaged through the glove compartment, pulled out cigarettes and took them out. One he lit. A few minutes later, he heard the squeak of wheels. That's right. Julia pulled into the street to see where he was. Tony, I'm sorry. I understand that mentioning Peter annoys you, but let's not make a big deal out of it. I'm trying to get over him, but so far I'm not doing a very good job. Yeah, I know, but I hate to see you like this. Then don't look. Then why did you bring me here to get out of my sight? She swung the baby carriage around angrily and, misjudging her strength and the country roads, tipped over, falling sideways. Tony did not have time to pick her up, and Julia fell to the ground with a thud and flew out of the stroller, crying like a little girl from resentment and pain. No pain at all. More like resentment that Tony had said that to her. He knew how she reacted to every remark he made. It was one thing for a stranger to say it. It's another thing if it's said by a friend who knows everything and anything. Julia, I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me. I'm sorry. Darling, you're my man. Tony, how can I forgive you when she was choking with anger and tears? If you blame me for my disability, how do you work with people after that? How do you get them back on their feet? Well, I'll tell you straight up that you're in the way now. Your own professionalism, work with disabilities, or you or me to tell you how many great doctors, being almost at death's door, put others on their feet. And this village needs your bright head. There are 2 assistants plus a driver with a car. She looked up at him from below and could not hold back the tears that rolled down her cheeks. Toto neatly put the stroller, also neatly put the girl in it, and without saying a word, just drove her friend into the house. Already there he transferred her to a bench near the stove and began to take off his sneakers, then dirty and muddy pants, sweater, despite Julia's fierce resistance. So don't even think about resisting. I'll bring you, by the way, the other day, washed and connected. There's water in the house, so you won't have to do it by hand. Nothing fell off the stroller, but the crown won't. Julia, but really, I'm sorry about what I said. It won't happen again. Let me put you on the stove to warm up and try to sleep. I'll stay with you for a couple of days while you get organized. What about your work? She looked at her friend in surprise. She knew how important it was to him. I just took a week at my own expense. I'll take another if I have to. Don't worry about it, sweetheart. It's important for me to get you settled in here and be comfortable. That you have everything you need. You've got firewood and food for at least a couple weeks. You got a cat and a dog and chickens. What else do you want? Then my boss knows exactly where I am and who I'm with. And by the way, he says hello and thank you very much. Thanks for what? I didn't remind my boss of Tony, but I just didn't understand what he was thanking her for. Yeah, he brought his wife to you, who couldn't get a diagnosis. And you knew right off the bat that she had cancer. And it's a good thing they detected it in time, punctured her, didn't let her die a horrible death. What's he talking about? Come on, it's my job. By the way, did you know that dogs and cats can detect cancer cells by smell? I've heard of it. I've even read about it. It's like the Americans have adopted this technique in hospitals. Now we're not America. At least we've got this outpatient clinic to deal with. Okay, I know there's a few charitable organizations in town. I'll contact them. I'll get them to drop off some equipment, medical supplies, and bandages. I understand summer's a hot time in the village. Oh yes, you'll have a lot of work to do. This one's got blood pressure, the other one's got early slopes, the third one's got shovel blisters, and so on and so forth. Wait till you see this. The local women from the neighboring villages will start asking you to marry their sons and grandsons. Believe me, that's a separate topic of conversation. Tony, are you really joking? The girl looked at her friend attentively and on her hands, having risen, settled down on the stove. No, believe me, in our villages there are 5 women per 10 men. That's the statistics. And believe me, your legs are not a judgment. If a man loves you, it's in a city where there's only silicone and eyelash extensions. Guys choose their girlfriends on principle. How much money is invested in her? And here in the villages is important natural beauty without embellishments. And believe me, for many your legs will not be an obstacle. Like for you? Did you just realize that now? Tony smiled and gave her a big, and in the rank to cover her legs and stroked her hand. He had loved this girl for a long time, even after she stopped walking. And the disability hadn't turned him away in any way, hadn't broken him for a minute. Only gave him an even greater desire to care for her, not to become her protector. I am your knight, and may it be without end. But at that moment, the front doors in the hay creaked and soft, light footsteps were heard. Tony and Julia looked at each other. They were definitely not expecting anyone today, and now they had an uninvited visitor. Good evening to this house. Neighbor Wendy's voice sounded loud and even resounding throughout the small house. Good evening, Grandma Wendy. How are you? How's your health? Tony was glad to see a neighbor he hadn't seen in 5 years. And by your prayers, Tony, I heard you had a doctor come to see us. That's good. We need doctors. I hear you need a cat for your house. Well, I brought you a kitten from my cat Red. Will you take it? We'll take Wendy. I don't know what your middle name is, I'm sorry. Julia said to her, looking out for matches. So it's you. Good evening again. Just call me Wendy. What's your name? Julia. Just Julia. I'm sorry I'm not meeting you on my feet. It's just my feet on wheels over there in the corner. The grandmother immediately realized that the new medically disabled. But she didn't show her surprise with any words or facial expressions. She was a wise woman who had delivered babies, but now she was no longer in good health, although she still had her wit and experience. It's all right, Julia, I understand you're Polish by nationality. Not by nationality, but by my father. He's Polish, and my mom is a native of St. Petersburg. So that's how I got my international mix. It's okay. It's good to have 2 nations together. And for your legs. But don't worry, we'll put you on them. Get out of here. You know, we've got a lot of holy places here. And the land is fertile. Build it with your bare feet and you'll feel the power coming from it. Wendy, do you really understand that Julia is a doctor and all that? It's science. And here I am with my superstitions. Here's my superstition. The red cat will be, believe me, a great rat catcher. And the grandmother took out a beautiful red kitten, which she immediately handed to me with joy. The girl almost jumped from the stove on her own 2 feet. After all, she had dreamed of such a miracle for a long time. And here it was, brought straight home. The cat looked at her carefully and flashed, started quietly muttering Julia under a warm hand stroked, lice it on the head. What a big kitten. Can you feel the breed? I've got a cat. What do you want? My son brought her to me. He says she's a purebred Siberian cat. Merc is alive, but my son's long gone. That's the legacy of my boy, and the old woman turned away. I quietly wiped away a tear, reflected on life, and Tony and Julia just fell silent for a moment. Wendy, do you happen to have any extra chickens for the household? We need to teach the metropolis the joys of rural life. Yes, please, even 10, I'll pay you the money. The girl was glad that her neighbor could help her so easily. Although, Tony, I don't have a chicken coop yet, and I don't have any feed. I do have chickens. I'll be able to give them to you in 2 weeks. They're still small. Let them grow up. My chickens are great dryers. So you'll always have homemade crates. Can you order feed from our head? He buys for the whole village. Thank you. Why did you have your blood pressure taken? Or do you have any complaints? Julia's professional sense has kicked in. My girl, I came to you not as a patient, but as a neighbor. But I'll come to the reception, but only as soon as you get settled both at home and in your hospital. Then I'll complain. But for now, she put milk, bread, and homemade on the table for you. The old woman put a bag on the table and began to take out food from it. By the way, Tony, give me a small plate for the cat. I'll pour him some milk. Let him get used to his new home. And if the little guy runs away, don't worry. He'll probably run to his mama's house and talk to the young ones for a few more minutes. Grandma went home and Julia and Tony went to bed. What was there to say? The day had been full of events, of emotions, of getting to know each other. But strangely enough, it was in this house on the stove that Julia slept as sweetly as she had never slept. Even at home, she dreamed of the sea. And once again, she was running down the beach on her own feet. Julia, wake up, girl. What's wrong? Tony's voice sounded as if from far away, and the girl didn't immediately realize she was still asleep. Tony, I'm sorry. What happened? The girl's voice sounded sleepy and somewhat annoyed. After all, she was sleeping so sweetly. You were crying in your sleep and moaning. I woke you up, but I'm sorry. I dreamt of the sea and the beach. I was running on the sand. It's a good thing I woke you up. Are you going to lie down again, or are you going to get up? And what time is it? I didn't look at the clock and was surprised. It was almost 12 o'clock. Wow, she's been asleep for almost 12 hours. Oh, I'm so hot. I've never slept that long. This place is really nice. It's easy to sleep. No nightmares. Tony, help me into the stroller. I gotta get up, wash up, feed the cat, and I gotta go to the outpatient clinic. You probably forgot it's Sunday. I fed the cat a long time ago. As far as sleeping on the stove while I'm here, that's fine. But when I'm gone, you'll have to sleep on the bed. Who's gonna carry you back and forth? Only me. Come on, go wash up and have breakfast or lunch. I've got it all ready. Yeah, Peter never fed me breakfast. He waited for me to cook. And if you don't, it's on you, Julia. You get a big slap in the face. And here it's just like that. Breakfast on the table and the cat's fed. And the furnace is fueled. Yeah, Tony, you know how to make a woman feel good. And without straining and without thinking about intimacy with the usual movement of your hands. Julia pulled up his pants, changed his shirt, and then slipped matches, for example, and pulled up a wheelchair, sat down through. First one leg, then the other, and then she drove out into the yard. Isn't it beautiful? It's beautiful. The words from the famous movie came to mind. But what can you do if it was really so? And Julia smiled quietly to herself. The cat immediately jumped into her arms and looked carefully into her face, as if asking what plans her mistress had for today. And there are no plans. It will be necessary, though, to inspect the garden, the henhouse, and everything in the yard. You're with me, kitten, as if understanding her words. Immediately the motivation hinted, jumped from her hands, and with all the vigor rushed into the garden. The garden to see the henhouse. The yard is good, but do you even eat, then? Tony stood on the doorstep and looked at his friend carefully. He regretted that he had asked her to live in the village like that, but it had seemed like a wonderful idea to him at the time, away from her ex-husband. Fresh air, natural products, no gas. But now he was standing there, thinking that he should first put the house in order, think about the car, refrigerator, groceries, and then take the invalid, how she would be here on her own. You know, she doesn't have to. I'll leave you my old cell phone. I'm sorry, I haven't gotten a new one yet. You'll call me every morning and evening. You promise. I bought it myself. I had to get the house cleaned up before I could bring you here. But now I'm here eating fine eyeballs and talking to you. But Tony, don't think about it. Trust me, I'm not that weak. That's a first. Plus there's a job, and there's people, and a car. So who's there to turn to in case of emergency? You know, it's a good thing the job came right out of the blue. In fact, it's a plus for you. In time, maybe then you'll go to the city. It's better to translate than to start from scratch. I said that and only then thought that words could offend my friend. So immediately bit my tongue and simply ducked into the plate. And Julia herself realized that the guy wanted the best. But it turned out as usual. Oh well. I mean, maybe you should be less reactive to words. You gotta get used to it. Girl to the fact that you will not get up. But at the second legs, as if pierced by a charge of current, and Julia, from surprise, shrieked and dropped the fork. What happened? Tony stood up from his seat in surprise. Nothing. It was just something that pricked Julia's heart. She didn't want to say that her legs were electrocuted. Don't entertain the hope that they might regain their sensitivity. That's the connection I had to the temple. Well, the one the head of the collective farm mentioned yesterday. In principle, it's possible. But let's do it next weekend. Just this morning, a man from the village council came to see the hen house. He said it was good, only that it needs some repairs and left to get some materials. So we should be here by 2 o'clock or so. So we go to the temple or wait for the master to repair the hen house. But of course, the master is more important. And my future ones don't need a decent house. So they had breakfast, though it was more like lunch. They chatted merrily. And the girl more and more caught herself thinking that here she would settle down. And this place would bring her a lot of happiness, although she did not realize that here she could meet not only her happiness, but also revelations. The days flew like minutes of the week, like hours. Tony returned to town, promising to come back on weekends, and she stayed on her own. But why on her own, she said to herself as she escorted Tony over the threshold. There's the cat, and then there will be more hens. Now I'll have to get used to living in the village. Soon there will be hens. Really, Carrot the cat flashed and lost his head, and her chin. Yeah, here comes reality. But it's time to get started on the house. And there maybe she'll really get up and start walking Carrot Top. Why don't I go see a priest? Well, if it doesn't help you get back on your feet, then at least you'll confess. The cat trustingly knocked, as if agreeing, and began to rub her face, mewing in her ear his song. What a marvelous animal. Yes, and what a wonderful song. And anyway, why was she so opposed to coming here? I guess it's the fear of change that stops a lot of people. Though now she realized it was all for her own good. Rural life and everyday life spun the girl, and the work carried her away. So Julia sometimes forgot that she was in a wheelchair. What's to say? The talent of an excellent therapist and experienced doctor make her famous. To the new doctor lined up lines of sufferers. Julia, you're our star. The head of the village council once told her. By the way, read about you in the newspaper. And he handed her a newspaper bought in a neighboring district. And indeed, on the first page, there was a note that the new doctor of the village of such and such puts not only people on their feet, but is considered a great diagnosis. And the reason for this is one case in the village. A trivial case. But probably it is from such situations that local legends and stories are born. In one resident of a neighboring village, a girl first grader fell ill. For a long time, they could not establish an accurate diagnosis. The little girl was bothered by a woody cough. Everyone thought a cold, but it turned out to be a heart problem. And it's good that the diagnosis could be made in time, when the problem can be solved with medication and did not have to resort to surgery. There are many such situations, and there will be more. Julia thought. After all, she loved these places and these hard-working, kind people. Andrew, could you do me a favor? One day, Julia asked the head of the village council. Yes, my dear, beautiful visitor. Lord of my rheumatism, tamer pressure all I can. Could you take me to that temple you spoke of, where Father John rules? Is it true that he has some kind of power? Julia, and you tell me this. Are you a doctor? No, I'm sorry, he may have powers. What kind of power? But I've never heard anything about it. You really believe that? I'm sorry for asking. You know, your grandmothers and neighboring villagers have been telling me all about him. Believe it or not, maybe we should go. It's a good thing. Let's go. We'll be at the service this Sunday. See our beauty. And communion with God, you know. I don't know, but maybe he'll help me so I can walk again. Do you think I'll be your eighth wonder of the world? The priest laid his hands on her, and she got up and walked. Julia herself did not realize at that moment why she had spoken so disparagingly about the priest, about faith and God. Her mother and grandmother of the youngest had accustomed the girl to faith, but apparently the Soviet authorities and her studies at medical school had nullified all faith in miracles. Andrew stood next to her, looked at her intently, and asked Julia, "How did it happen that you are in a wheelchair?" "You won't believe it, but my husband beat me. I fell, hit myself, and lost not only my legs, but also my unborn child. I apologize if I hurt your feelings as a believer, but when a husband beats his wife, somehow my faith in God and higher powers fades to nothing. I do. You know, in our temple, Father John was disabled himself. Yeah, well, don't look at me so skeptical. Just like you had problems with your legs. From what I hear, he didn't ride in a wheelchair, but when he took it, it went away. But if you don't believe me, I won't bother you with these stories, but I'll take you. And I should go to the service myself. I've got things to do." And the head of the village council left her outpatient clinic. But on the threshold, he stopped and turned around and asked, "Did you and your husband get married?" Julia did not say anything. She just nodded her head negatively, and the man didn't say anything, but just lowered his head and went about his business. Yes, life is such an unpredictable thing that the greatest sorrow and the greatest happiness can happen to anyone. But already on Sunday at 9 o'clock, Andrew's car was parked near her house, and he, with a smile on his face in a new suit, knocked on the door of her Julia. "It's Andrew, open up. Taking you to the temple today, Andrew. Come in. I'll make tea and come out to you. You can stay in the kitchen. I've made pancakes. We'll have breakfast, if you don't mind." "I don't mind. But to tell you the truth, I ate a lot this morning, and we still have to drive 30 minutes on our roads. So if you don't want to be late for the most solemn part of the service, let's go well. I, in principle, also ate in the morning, so, as they say, load me into your carriage and let's go. My car hasn't been bought yet. It's probably waiting somewhere in the showroom, but with a salary like this, I won't see it soon." She was trying to make a joke, but it didn't work. "Julia, if you need transportation, don't hesitate to speak up. I can just forget to offer you my carriage, as you said. Because if you need to go to the city or something, just a whistle. Thank you, I'll say. I don't know how to whistle, to be honest." So they drove to the neighboring village. They joked and laughed merrily. Andrew understood perfectly well that he was carrying a fragile girl, plus an invalid, so he tried to drive slower so as not to shake on the local roads. Julia understood this and mentally thanked him, thinking that her ex-husband would probably have driven like a daredevil, not caring about her needs. As they entered the neighboring village, Andrew steered the car steadily along the southern road. In a couple of minutes, they were standing near a wooden church. What kind of church is it, though? A real work of art. It was a rather large church, made of a solid log cabin with high domes and gilded crosses. It is really beautiful, as birch trees grow around. By the lake, you can see the forest not far away, and all around are greenery, blue sky, and curious people's eyes. Julia, don't pay attention to people. Everyone may be staring at you right now. That's why I warn you at once not to take slanted glances to heart. The main thing is not to touch them with your hands. I'm used to everything else. Then let me help you into the stroller, grab my neck. Julia put her arms around Andrew's neck and mentally noted to herself, he smells good. And how strong are his arms? You're a fool. In a wheelchair, you're looking at a man. But why not? She looked up and their eyes met. They met. How blue are his eyes? That's just creepy. Andrew, how blue are your eyes? Like the sky. But you didn't come here to see my eyes. And people are already looking at us funny, even though you said to ignore them. Or did you? Julia grinned playfully and looked at the man. He was old enough to be her older brother or even her father. But right now she looked at him like a woman who had long ago forgotten how to flirt, but remembered that she could be beautiful and desirable. A merry gaggle of cats, and the one for whom one rolls down mountains, performs feats, and all that. But really, as she looked around at the people standing around the temple, she noticed the people squinting at them. She clenched her fists, driving her nails under the elbow of her wheelchair, and raised her head high. Andrew, it's a good thing you can carry me in this wheelchair, or I probably wouldn't have made it. Or at least turn around and drive away. Well, if you could handle it, you could handle it. But as for leaving, yeah. But I want to show you our pride, this temple from the inside, and introduce you to Father John. He's your age, by the way. And if I'm not mistaken, this man used to be in the military. Now he's ruling. Before she could finish, a priest came around the corner and waved. Andrew waved back. There's our spiritual father. Good afternoon, Andrew. Good afternoon. And to you, Julia. It's good to see you in my temple. How do you know my name? Although, pardon me, that's probably a silly question for a priest. It's not stupid at all, but I'll tell you right away. It's not mystical. It's just that I've heard a lot about you. I was thinking of coming to see you myself. Julia wanted to make a joke, but then he didn't. It's not appropriate to joke about such things with a priest. No, just to get acquainted. After all, medicine and religion should go together. Don't you think so? I suppose so. But I'm sorry, Father, I was brought up in the era of developed socialism. That's why you're not friendly with religion. But still I came here. I've been told a lot about you. Probably that I have some kind of healing gift, the priest replied. But that's more your paraphilia. By the way, and about you are legends among my parishioners. You accurately diagnose, so it's kind of similar. But that's not what we're talking about. Come on in. The service is about to begin, and the priest gestured both of them into the temple. When Julia drove carefully into the wooden church, she was surprised by the beauty she had not seen for a long time, even in large churches. And here in an ordinary village, the icons are painted gold, and the right? Yes, her grandmother was probably right. When priests would walk like Christ with one stick and in one robe, then faith would be strong. But she did not say anything, but just stood on the baby carriages near the entrance and listened to John's sermon. Indeed, this priest had a lot of eloquence. I guess I could immediately see the KGB school, where rhetoric was at the highest level, as well as the ability to persuade. Well, that's probably the reason why there are such legends about this priest. But it's their bread, their job to turn Orthodox and unbelievers alike to Christ, to strengthen the faith and whatever it takes. What do you think of my sermon? Father John came up to Nina after the service and looked at her carefully. You know, it was impressive. I think even the most unbelievers would definitely become your parishioners. But I don't know if I'd be one of them. But faith is a thing. You know, you have to come to it. So no one's gonna force it on you. Although I'd love to have you among my friends at least. I'm glad, and frankly, I'd love to accept your offer of friendship. You might actually. Come see me in the outpatient clinic. As your blood pressure goes. Maybe I should prescribe you some vitamins. You have kids. Oh, I'm sorry, that was a silly question. You're a priest. It's all right, don't worry. But I'll definitely come back tomorrow if you don't mind. Julia nodded her head and only wanted to turn around and go to Andrew's car as her gaze fell on a man. Strange, she noted to herself, a painfully familiar back and gait in general. But she shook her head and drove on to the car of the head of the village council, justifying this similarity. And what can he do? My Peter is mine. She still considered him hers, though she had long ago tried to forget him. They had parted under not the best of circumstances, and Julia still wore the ring. And she can't even get to the registry office to file for divorce. Is it worth getting a divorce? Maybe everything can go on as it is. She grinned wickedly and let him chase me if he thinks of getting married a second time. I don't think he'll ever get a divorce. Never. Julia, I hope you didn't wait long for me. Did Andrew's voice bring her out of her own angry musings? No, it's okay. I'll at least get out of my little world called home. Work is great. How's the service, by the way? Hope you're not disappointed with your time. No, Andrew, if you don't mind coming down here, you should definitely take me with you. I really like it here. It's beautiful. You can really come here for sketches. A lot of people come here. Imagine, by the way, some of the paintings depict me. Just like our priest. Andrew, have you ever had it in this place that you look at a person from the back, and it seems to you that you have already seen him somewhere? I mean, it could be anywhere. It doesn't have to be here and now. And that you've met someone you know. Julia did not say that she had seen her husband's back, but just kept silent. She didn't pursue the topic herself, but the unpleasant residue remained. Though business and care of the house and the outpatient clinic made her forget about it. Although soon the girl again experienced a lot of unpleasant moments. And the reason for this was the fall holiday, which in the village it was customary to celebrate at the very beginning in the temple. Who does not know this holiday, when in the temple are carried to sanctify apples, honey, and nuts, which are loved by many? Julia, let's go to the temple. We should consecrate these first apples from your garden. You've done well, by the way. You've trimmed the trees, removed the old bushes and branches. Kudos and honor to you. But Andrew, it's not without your help. Julia once again caught herself thinking that Andrew liked her more and more, although the man himself was polite and all. He didn't try to pester her or somehow show his own desire, only the maximum of politeness, attention, and help. Though in fact, for that she was already grateful to him. After all, few people cared about her. Tony didn't count in this case. Yes, I take a little credit for that too. But it's still your labor, which is worth appreciating. And the cat has grown hens everywhere in the yard, and in the house you can feel the hand of the mistress. It's true that the house and the garden were cleaned. Everywhere you could feel the attention and care in all this. Julia put not a part of herself, but all of herself, and nature gave her much more gratitude in return. They drove to the temple and sweetly chatted about everything. And the girl did not even suspect what could happen to her that day, when Andrew helped her to get out of the car and get on the stroller. Julia turned it around with the usual movement of her hands and drove to the temple. Not waiting for her counselor, she knew full well that Andrew would not enter until he put the car in the church. In fact, he tried to drive as close to the entrance as possible to make it easier for his companion to get in. When Julia drove into the church, she looked for Father John with her eyes. The service had not yet begun, and it was possible to talk to him a little, as was usual before every service. But when she heard his familiar voice and turned around, and she almost fell off the stroller, Julia just couldn't believe her eyes. Standing next to the priest was her husband, and he was crying. He was really crying. Julia could see large tears rolling down his face, and his hands were trembling folded in the area of his chest. She sat in the stroller and could not believe her eyes. Her husband was here in the temple crying. There was no way that could have happened. Peter had never attended church, especially during their entire time together. He didn't cry. She hadn't seen a single tear on his face. Even when his mother had died, he'd been stingy with tears at the funeral, as well as any emotion. But could it be her hallucinations? A trick of the eye? Yes, it couldn't be. She remembered this man better than anyone else. And it hadn't been long enough since they parted to forget his profile, that favorite leather jacket of his. Come up and say hello. Why not? After all, she didn't really owe him anything. He's the one who got her into this state. Peter, is that you? Julia's words sounded to the man out of the blue and like a judgment on Julia. Is it really you? Have I changed so much that you don't recognize me? Or have I aged? Although the stroller does not add beauty, but I think you can recognize my face. What brings you here? I hope it's not to follow me. No, I'm sorry. I'm here to see my Father John on a personal matter. 8. My husband has a personal matter that has nothing to do with taking care of his invalid wife. Julia, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry you're in a wheelchair like this. But I'm here about something else. What is it? Julia didn't understand why she was interested in the private life of her husband, who had made her an invalid, but she couldn't stop herself. She didn't care about his problems. But most likely, it was a woman's curiosity that prevailed in this case. But her husband, strangely enough, did not react harshly to her harsh statement and just looked at her pitifully and walked away. Wow, thought Julia, what had happened to her husband? Previously, he would have simply torn her apart for such words. But now the girl did not know how to react. She didn't expect herself to be so brave. But turning around, she saw behind the back of Andrew Rural Head, who stood and with a hard expression, looked at all this. His gaze was the same as her ex-husband's. But, Andrew, you have heard everything, but I can introduce you in absentia. This is my ex-husband, or rather, still husband. We're just not divorced. And he's the reason I'm sitting here in a wheelchair right now. The man smiled and squatted down in front of Nina. He took her hands in his and kissed them, not realizing what he was doing. And then said quietly, you know, if he had said something bad to you, I would have killed him for sure. Here's a cross for you. And he crossed himself, and then he kissed her hands again. Andrew's treatment of her simply shocked her into a state of mild shock, and she blushed, like a freshman getting her first taste of light wine and kissing a guy. Like a grown woman, and so blushed with shame, Julia thought and simply tried to take her hands from Andrew's strong palms. You don't have to take your hands away. I didn't hurt you. By the way, John's father told me that you can, in fact, be put back on your feet. I wonder how. She wanted to be sarcastic, like, is this place prayed for? Or is there a special prayer? But she didn't. She didn't want to spoil such a beautiful moment. And by the way, she didn't care that people were standing around and looking at this couple as if they were mesmerized. The head of the village council and the invalid. No, he has a masseur he knows. He's a practicing guru or something, but he's the one who got him back on his feet after the tragedy. That's how I remember it. You said he was in the missile force somewhere, and not in the missile force, but in security, guarding a secret facility in a space town. Well, I guess it's not that simple. By the way, he promised to give me his phone number, but he said that he would contact him first to clarify whether he accepts patients or not. Where is he now? Do you think I have any chance of walking on my own legs? I think it's worth using any method, and as a medical man, you should know that. Now let's go into town. I know a great taco place, and they have a real Mexican chef. At the mention of food, Julia realized how hungry she was, and her stomach was charging so treacherously that the sound must have been heard by everyone around her. Yep, looking around. She looked at the people and saw that everyone was looking at her like she was a free circus. So be it. Andrew is a fine man and a fine man. Surely he's the one every woman from small to large is pining for. She proudly raised her head and turned the stroller and went to the car. Look, I'm not so helpless. Yes, the afternoon and evening had been charming. Great company and delicious tacos, a cozy cafe and Andrew nearby. But the minutes flew by like crazy. And only in the evening Julia remembered that she had to work tomorrow, and she looked at her watch and shrieked quietly. Oh, I have to work tomorrow, and it's so late. And the cat's home fed. And the chickens are affected by the costs of city life, when you are not responsible for anyone but yourself. Don't worry about it. I called your neighbor's grandmother, and she's been feeding everyone. I've got a car, and I'll take you home. How are you enjoying your evening, by the way? Andrew, you don't know how good I feel. I had a wonderful evening here. That's good. So you were able to forget about your husband, erase him from your memory. And that was the truth. She didn't even think about Peter for a minute. And Tony had kind of faded into the background. And the strangest thing was that she enjoyed Andrew's company. And the man himself seemed to enjoy her company. Andrew, please tell me if you like me. That's when I just sit like this and my mangled legs and the wheelchair are not visible. Warmed by wine and the attention of a handsome man, Julia didn't know why she asked that. Maybe she wanted more attention? Maybe to believe that she was attractive as before. You know, Julia, you are a very beautiful young woman, and I will try to put you on your feet if you will let me, and then it's up to you to decide how we're going to proceed. She nodded her head and looked down at him, thinking how not only was he nice, but also sensible. He didn't say he'd be with her forever. He didn't swear to be faithful to her love like Tony had. He just gave her a choice, but he said he liked her openly, which she couldn't help but be pleased about. And it was at that moment that she realized her past was behind her, gone with her head. Like her Peter did today, Andrew, thank you so much. You know, your words are like a prayer to me. And I just want to do whatever it takes to get my legs walking again. And you're right, then we'll see what we can do. What do you mean? That's it for now. Let's go home. He said it so warmly. It made her want to go home with him. But so far it was just her fantasies and daydreams. Though why dreams? She'd have to get back on her feet. And then maybe she'd ride in Andrew's car and look out the window at the trees and the houses of the field flying by. And it would be quiet and peaceful, as it had never been, not even with Tony, who she knew was wholeheartedly in love with her. And how right he'd been when he'd said that her legs would be no barrier to a man in love who wanted her. What's on your mind? My dear sorceress. And why did Julia smiled and looked at the small man sitting next to her, who was ready to outshine the whole world for her? Well, I don't know, I just wanted to call you that. He turned and looked at her with his sky blue eyes. About what? You know, I just want to keep going, keep going, keep going. No. I should stop at a gas station, have a coffee, eat a hot dog, and then get on the road again. Yes, that's an interesting thought. But I, like you, love the road, especially at night or in the evening, when the sun goes down or it's already set, and you're just driving along not knowing where you're going. I hope you know where we're going now. Yes, I think your Carrot Top is waiting for his mistress. And indeed, the cat was already sitting on the porch looking at her, and the chickens were already sitting on the roost, fed and fed by a kind neighbor. Andrew carried her into the house in his arms, then brought the stroller in, asked if he needed anything, and left. And really, she did not need anything now, but just to be alone with her thoughts, to think about how to live on. And what's next? We have to go to a masseur and work on her legs. You're a medical professional, Julia. You do the thinking. She washed her face and lay down on the bed Tony had made. And just when she closed her eyes, she fell into a dream. It had been a long time since she had slept like this, without dreams, without emotions, and almost until noon Julia simply slept. Although it was Monday, and she always set her alarm clock for 7 o'clock, but that one wasn't new to her, where a knock on the door made her wince, being floored. It's Andrew. I didn't catch you at work, and I can't reach you. You're fine. Andrew, come in. It's not locked. I overslept. I'm fine. I was getting worried. Why didn't you tell me you had the day off, by the way? I wasn't planning on it. I don't know why you decided that. I didn't decide that for you. We were seen at the temple yesterday. Then we went to the restaurant. And when I came to your office, I was told on the spot why we're not together, and why am I asking where Julia is? Wow. So by country standards, we're a couple now. And it turns out we are? But by the way, I don't mind this way of putting it. And I'm pleased that we're almost married. You do know, by the way, that we went to the priest yesterday to arrange the wedding? Even so, Julia really didn't even realize that people thought like that. But the thought itself really pleased her. At that moment, she did not feel her own disability and inferiority. And the very fact that she could be with this handsome man was already inspiring. Yeah, we both know what happened yesterday. But be prepared to be questioned about the details of your future celebration. Thank you for the heads up. But Andrew, I'm interested in another fact. Julia, with a habitual movement of her hand, moved the stroller to herself, threw one leg over, then with her whole body moved into it and threw the other leg over. It was as familiar to her as brushing her teeth or peeling potatoes would be to a normal person. I see you don't need any help. You're doing quite well on your own. Yes, it's a habit and a year of training. But that's not what we're talking about. Andrew, I'm interested in something else, and you can help me figure it out, no problem. Say what you need to say. I saw my husband at the temple yesterday. But why did he come? That's what I need to find out. You can approach John. I'm on good terms with him. Unless it's a secret confession, I suppose. Oh, and just so he's not in doubt. Here's my wedding photo and my passport, which still says we're husband and wife. You can tell in my story that he beat me and now he's here. What's his goal? Maybe he wants to do it again. He wants to hit you. Are you serious? Yeah, the whole village is gonna stand up for you. Andrew, I understand. And that my husband can do anything. He's the kind of man who will stop at nothing. That's one thing. And in terms of my defense, do you have to move in with me or do I have to move in with you? That's great. Let's get your chickens and your cat, get your stuff and go. I have a big house. I don't think Tony would mind. And I feel more comfortable on neutral ground. So if you could just ask John why my husband came here. That's why I came here, by the way. With all this talk, I've forgotten why I came to see you. He told us yesterday that the two of us could come to him. So let's get ready. I'll make you a quick breakfast and get you to the priest. I'm not going yet. Andrew quickly made sandwiches, brewed tea, and invited her to the table. Yeah, look how thoughtful he is. Just like Tony. There's a lot of people to choose from. Are you smiling? That's wonderful. It means you're in a good mood, and your husband's presence around doesn't dampen your mood. Julia, excuse me, why haven't you divorced yet? If you don't want to, you don't have to answer. No, it's simple and trivial. I myself was not eager to file for divorce. And with my legs, I don't have much time to go through the courts. And your husband. But I guess his pride didn't allow him to stoop to the level of having to deal with the issue himself. I'll say this, probably we were both satisfied with this state of affairs. Would you like a divorce? The man's voice sounded calm, but inside him everything was raging. Yes, and understandably, if she does not want to divorce, then, apparently, still loves her husband, and he simply has nothing to do around. And if he does, he has every chance to make her happy. Although, on the other hand, with or without a husband, he will try to make this woman happy. What do you think, Andrew? I think so. Julia nodded her head and ate her sandwich and went outside. She really wanted to divorce her husband, but she was afraid to do it herself. No wonder. After all, Julia knew her husband well, and if he did not like the idea of divorce to be beaten again, and there was no telling what the consequences might be. Andrew left the house, closed the door, and looked carefully at the back of the girl sitting in the wheelchair. Only now he began to understand a little what she had been through. Julia, let me help you sit down later behind the wheelchair and let's go. And you can ask John yourself, by the way. Why did your husband come? She nodded her head and with a familiar movement of her arms around Andrew's neck, who moved her to the front passenger seat. Then he loaded the stroller into the trunk and got behind the wheel. The man had been examining his son for a long time, but was all afraid to show his feelings. Katya, for the last few days, caught her interested look at himself. Of course, it was possible to delicately ask what yes, how. But in the very case intervened the ex-husband of her Julia. Although what ex, if they are still not divorced, and damn him. He came here for a reason, and he went straight to John. John went straight for it. Maybe he really wants Julia back. Have you thought about it? Switching to you. Asked Andrew that your husband Peter wants you back, and therefore went to the priest, but so to speak, with an authority figure to influence you. I thought so. But I know my husband well. He's not used to acting like this. He's rude and mean, even though he has 2 degrees. He was brought up in an intelligent family. But if anything is out of his control, he'll just raise his hand and beat you and that's it. Any constructive conversation is out of the question. That's why I was confused yesterday by his behavior and his reaction to my words. Calm, even humility, and no rudeness. Well, his people were there, witnesses. Maybe that stopped him. Oh no. He beat me up in front of witnesses once. And you can imagine, it was a special treat for him. It was his way of elevating his status, showing he's not beholden to anyone. Yeah, well, if that's the case, his behavior does look suspicious at the very least. I'm surprised you guys made it through the night on your own. All right, we'll go. I'll talk to John. Half an hour later, they were sitting in the courtyard in the priest's gazebo, and John was putting together the table and putting on the samovar. How good of you to come. Just like that without a call. You invited us yesterday, so how could you not come? By the way, Father, Julia has a question for you. You see, here's the thing. Yesterday you were approached by her husband, who, in fact, is responsible for the tragic confluence, for the fact that she does not walk. What kind of husband? Tall, swarthy, in a gray leather jacket. He arrived in a white car. You must remember him. He's quite stately and not like the locals. Julia, I have a lot of people coming to see me, so don't take that as praise. But I really might not have remembered him. No, you were just pulling up. And at that moment he turned around and walked towards you. Yeah, that's right. You see, I know him very well. And there's no way he'd just come here. I'm just afraid he's gonna make me do something terrible. I'm afraid to even guess what it is. Let's just say that in the old days, a word he didn't like could get him beaten up. And the result of that beating is sitting in a wheelchair in front of you right now. I understand you, Julia. You're afraid for yourself. But you can sleep well with this man. He did identify himself as Peter. He came here for a different reason. And that reason is not you. Certainly not to divorce you or any other issue. But what then? I saw him crying. And knowing Peter, he's never cried at his own mother's funeral. And here I'm at a loss to guess. You shouldn't. My dear Julia, this is not a secret confession. So I can tell you the reason why he came here, to soothe your soul and dispel all doubts. The priest stood up and went to the window. He must have been thinking about whether to tell or not, but he realized that the woman was right, and it was worth answering her question. After all, she was his wife and a woman who could really have been maimed by this man. I will tell you the reason why this man came here and decide for yourself if he is threatening you or not. Peter came and asked for my help in removing his sin. And I suppose that sin is you, Julia, what he did to you. Why would he say that? Peter thinks all his unborn children are dead because God has turned his back on him. Those words made Julia shudder. So he had other women, and they slept with him pregnant, but apparently couldn't give birth for some trivial reason. Peter was raising his hand at them. She commanded and hooked her fingers into the handrails of her wheelchair. Julia, I suppose. Do you know why his woman can't give birth? And it's not about God or a curse. Peter still raises his hand to them, like he did to me. When I fell and tragedy struck my legs. I was also pregnant, but the due date was so small I didn't realize it. Thank you for sharing your grief with me. I will definitely pray for your soul and hope that the Lord will give you the strength to stand on your feet and feel the joy of motherhood and find a good man. And you tell me, Julia, did you get married to Peter? No, he was against it, and I didn't really insist. And you know, we're both doctors, so to speak, people of scientific mind. And what advice did you give my husband, by the way? Let that be my secret. And how do you feel about going to church? But I hope you'll come to the temple. I'll try, Father. I really like it here. By the way, Andrew told me you know a doctor who got you back on your feet. Oh, by the way, I'm glad you reminded me. That's not true. A doctor like Emmanuel the Masseur. And he really helped me get back on my feet. I called him this morning, by the way, and he's ready to see me in 2 weeks. He's in advanced training right now, so you're going to have to wait a little while. I really didn't know all the specifics of your situation, because he spread his hands as if apologizing for not being able to fully help her. But thank you. And that's the end of my thanks to you, Father John. What matters to me is that you care about me. And there's the truth. Maybe I'll be lucky enough to go. You will. By the way, I'll give you some experience of my own. When it's warm, you take off your shoes in the morning and walk barefoot. Step on the wet grass dew. It has lasting power. Do you have a lush garden, by the way? As I recall, Anatole's mother used to grow various fragrant herbs, so he will be especially grateful to you. Thank you. Father John, I guess we'll be going. The girl looked intently at Andrew, begging him to get out of here as soon as possible. She didn't know why she wanted to leave so badly. Maybe from the overabundance of information, maybe for some other reason. But Andrew understood it and did not delay. He turned down 6 old friends and took her to her car. Julia, what's wrong? You left the priest's house so quickly. Did he hurt you? No, Andrew, it's okay. I got an answer to my question. And he didn't hurt me in any way. John, honestly, I don't know. But it's like someone was pushing me out of this house. Well, I won't bother you with my attention, and you'll forgive me. I have to run an errand. I'll take you home. I'll drop by tonight, if you don't mind. Sure, I don't mind. He looked in this and all the following evenings. trying to become not just the best friend and assistant, but something more in the life of the girl in whom he fell in love at first sight. And he really didn't care that she was disabled, moving around in a wheelchair. The man was ready to carry her in his arms, but only just. "Andrew, you were right," Julia once said. "And you and I are already talking. Our nurse Nadezhda asked me today, out of the blue, 'When are we getting married?' Wow. But basically, what do you want? Tony's been telling me that I've been visiting too much. I mean, after all, you're a single girl, you live on your own. You should talk to him. You don't have to. I'm really uncomfortable. It's like I complained about you. That's not a man's habit." She smiled quietly. Really? Tony was right to a certain extent. But on the one hand, she was enjoying the visit. "Andrew, by the way, before I forget, Father John got through to his friend, the Monopoly therapist, and booked you in for this Sunday. And by the way, we won't have to travel far. The specialist will come to his temple. Can you have him come down here and take a look at you? Maybe he can really get you back on your feet. Do you still believe in miracles? I'm not much of a doctor, but I wouldn't say no to help. I'd like to think you'll need me on my own, not in a wheelchair." "Do you really think so?" Andrew looked at her carefully. Yes, he smiled. But behind that smile there was sadness. And it was no coincidence that Andrew ran into Julia's husband again in the temple, who had come not by himself, but with his own position. Yes, a man knows how to choose his women. But I guess it's not fate. Andrew did not want to argue with him in the temple, but simply waited until he went outside, and approaching, quietly said, "We need to talk." Peter looked at the strange man in amazement, but did not argue, but simply asked his companion to wait for him in the car, and stepped aside. "Why did you come here to make fun of a single woman again? I know very well that you are her husband and what you did to her. Are you the reason she's in a wheelchair? No, that's not what I'm talking about. I didn't know anything about my ex-wife being here. I came to see John's father because my girlfriend can't carry my baby. Then first of all, why don't you give her a divorce? And secondly, why don't you support her? She refused my money. I'll file for divorce without her. And maybe Father John is right. We all pay for our sins. And what happened to Nina is my sin, which I'm now buying with my kids. Have you tried just talking to your wife and putting things right? You're probably right. I should come and talk to my wife and ask for her forgiveness, and maybe God will grant us both healing." He lowered his head and walked toward the car, but after a few steps he turned around and shouted toward Andrew, "I'll be there in 2 weeks on Sunday. Give this to Nina." And now the man stood in front of Nina, thinking whether or not to tell her about her husband's visit. But perhaps he should tell her, for his visit might be an unpleasant surprise. And he didn't want to get on the young woman's nerves. "There's something else I wanted to tell you. Really, don't get me wrong. What is it you have to say to me? You're not going to ask me to marry you." "Yes, I've seen your husband. I've been talking to him lately. He's coming next weekend with his woman." A shiver ran down the young woman's spine at those words. And for a second she felt as if an electric shock had slipped through her stiff legs. Had sensitivity returned to them? It couldn't be. It's the stuff of science fiction. "Are you saying he's coming here? It's for me. What did he say to you? And how dare you talk to him about me at all?" "Julia, wait, he came to the temple with a girl, and she keeps losing the baby." He asked the priest for advice, repented that he had committed many sins, and this is his punishment. And wait, my dear man, he wants to come and ask your forgiveness for what he has done. He better give you a divorce. That's what I want with all my heart. He'll file for divorce himself. That's what Peter told me. That's what Peter told me. Why do I have to hear it from you?" Julia turned to yelling in anger, though she didn't understand why she was yelling at Andrew. In fact, he had always helped her, and now she was choking with anger, but she couldn't help it. After all, her husband is coming here with his new fling, who will look at her and point his finger and say your wife is handicapped. You realize that he will come here with his girlfriend, his mistress, and that one will point her finger at me and say I am handicapped. What am I supposed to do? You don't. He's not coming here to introduce you and her. He's coming here to apologize to you, silly. Do you understand that? He's going to make up for his sins and give you a divorce to make up for his sins. Ha, That's Peter. Yeah, I wouldn't believe it for the life of me. Julia answered her, what if it's true and he gives you a divorce? Ask sincere forgiveness. It'll help, but I don't know what would make you happy. Andrew, I'll tell you more. I forgave him a long time ago, but now I don't want to see him, especially not with his new girlfriend. And you don't have to meet him. I'll be with you and I'll talk to you in person if you give me the go-ahead. If I have to, I'll tell him all the things you want to say and more. Julia herself did not realize what she wanted. For the truth was, she had forgiven her husband long ago. Let him go threw him out of her life. And now she finds out like this that he has another woman. They want to have a child, but he didn't want to have children with her. Why is that? Julia, why are you angry? You've accomplished a lot. He will come to apologize on his own. He'll give you a divorce. I lost my legs because of him, of my unborn child. Do you understand that? And now I find out that he took a new wife, wants a child with her, and killed mine. Tears were streaming down her face. After all, she remained an invalid without a family and a child. And he will have everything that she did not have and still does not have. How could she live with such a thing? The woman simply did not understand it. She tried to dull her own pain by working, taking care of people, garden, animals, and this house, everything that surrounds her. I beg you, don't cry. Let's make up our minds. So talk to your husband, and I'll be right there with you, so to speak, as your support. Solve all your issues with him, so you can be calm. Do I have to? I just want to get my divorce and forget it all. Forget it like a bad dream. That's the way it's gonna be. But first, you need to not only deal with your own husband, but you need to get checked out. How would you feel about having him check you out here at home, by the way? Yeah, I'm fine with it. I'm comfortable here, and I think he's used to working from home. Good. Then I'll make arrangements with him and bring him here. And please don't cry, and everything will be fine. And Andrew put his hands on her lap, patted them lightly, and stood up and walked out of the house. Wow, this is news, Julia thought. And so everything started so well. Her husband's arrival, his repentance, the possibility of a divorce, and a box. Woo, what a day. It all came at once, but nothing, we'll figure it out. Carrot Cat poked and began to lose, and her chin encourages her aspirations. Say, mistress, everything will work out. Don't upset her nor looked around and wiped her tears. What's there to say? It's not worth it for old offenses to spoil the life, which began to get better, and the rest. Julia, under what circumstances did you lose the ability to feel your legs? The question embarrassed her, but she was ready for it. Yeah, you know my husband hit me once. I fell, and I lost feeling in my legs. But there's no fracture, no nerve damage, just a bad bruise, that's all. Doctors say it could be psychosis. But what if they tried? Nothing's working. Aha, but I've seen it happen more than once, particularly when working with soldiers coming out of the war. And by the way, there's a solution there. Griessive massages and applications, mineral water baths. You know, excuse me, what's your name? Oleg, just Oleg. So Oleg, I'm a therapist myself. I've tried a lot of methods of means of techniques, but nothing at all. Well, you haven't had me until now. I'm not a magician, I'm just learning. But I'll try to get you back on your feet. So you're sure I can walk? Julia was lying on the improvised massage table, under which they took a wide bench, and smiled. There's no fracture. The nerves, as you say, are intact, so I don't see any serious reason why you can't walk or feel your legs. So the man pressed a point on her foot, but in such a way that Julia cried out. A current ran through her leg with terrible force, and she could have sworn 220 volts had been run through it. Oleg, did you just run electricity through my body? Electricity? No, I'm working on your active points, which temporarily fell asleep, became inactive, and were responsible for your legs. And what I'm seeing, I like it already. So I can give you back your legs, sensation, and mobility. Now just relax and enjoy. With every massage, with every touch of my hands, the feet didn't chew. They were responding to the touch, becoming docile. She could even move her fingers on the tables already, but she could not yet stand on them fully. Even so, the results pleased her immensely. Andrew, can you imagine? I can feel my legs. I'll be able to walk soon. And that's the best thing that's happened to me lately. But besides the fact that I moved here and met you honestly, you're glad you came here and met me. And that's a no-brainer, isn't it? You have become to me not just a friend and a helper, but something more than a friend. Julia, do you remember what I told you earlier? She looked at him carefully, trying to remember what he might have said to her. But so far it was not coming out well. I don't think you do. But I'll remind you, as soon as you're back on your feet, I'll ask you to marry. Wow, Andrew, I don't even know how I'm supposed to react to that. You don't. Just first stand on your feet, get on your feet without a stick, and then think whether to accept my proposal or not. The young woman smiled and lowered her head, trying to hide her joy in her smile and the bright sparks in her eyes. She had the pleasant words of a man she had been waiting for so long. Yes, I'll think about it then. In the meantime, you will help me to disperse, because how to go to the registry office, in a wedding dress and with a stick in his hand? It wouldn't be very pretty. No, it wouldn't. You'd have to match the wand to the dress. And I'll tell you, that could be a problem in particular. If the wand is masculine, not feminine, no stones or flowers, and all that. Wouldn't you agree, Andrew? Yeah, I'll have to figure out where to get you one or have it customized. Well, why don't you tell me how your results with the masseur went? It's great. My legs are regaining sensation. By the way, Andrew, I'm gonna need your help. I have a husband coming to my house this Sunday, and I really don't want to face him alone. Will you be there for me? Of course, I'll always be there for you. And that was the truth. Andrew was practically always there for her. In her darkest moments, Peter never showed up. He didn't want to look her in the eye and apologize, but he did file for divorce, which he notified her about in a little note. That's fine. I'm glad I didn't have to meet you in person, and I forgave you a long time ago. So you're done with your sins. I'll try to take care of mine. In a few weeks, she received a divorce certificate, and 6 months later, she was choosing a wedding dress in a bridal salon. And Tony Julia was there to help her. But why him? You're getting married again. Tony, but you're my friend, and he's my husband-to-be. I invited you to this wedding ahead of time so you wouldn't have to go through the motions. Don't let anything happen to you this time. Tony, you say that again, and I'll beat you up for sure. No, I know you're heavy-handed, so let's just try on a wedding dress and decide which one's best. Otherwise, you'll never pick one. And you're definitely getting married in a tracksuit. Oh yeah, it's so comfortable, and you don't have to worry about matching sneakers. I'll say, the wedding ceremony was modest and quiet with a minimum of guests, but still solemn and beautiful. And of course, they were married in the local church by Father John. And Tony, as an old friend, witnessed, Ava's farmhouse to Not On Here are the keys to the house. I've already transferred the deeds to you, and may it be your new family nest. Yeah, thanks, man. Because this is where I met my happiness and got back on my feet in every sense of the word. You're my best friend and comrade. Without you, I would never have been happy. I would have sat in my apartment and spent my days and nights alone. And here. And there's a new happiness waiting for us. Yes, my darling. Yes, my dear man. I couldn't have gotten back on my feet without you, nor without the help of our spiritual advisor, Father John. So please, everyone to our celebration. We've booked a small restaurant, so it's gonna be family style. I don't want any flashy lights. Really, what's she need it for? She's got a family now, a husband, a house of her own. And maybe there'll be kids. Who knows, maybe these places will really help her to get pregnant again and find the joy of motherhood. And let everything be well with Peter. And she at that moment sincerely wished him well. From the bottom of her heart, even in spite of the grief he had brought her. Maybe she wouldn't have met her true happiness without it. Who knows?